From the Southeast Asian capital city of the Philippines, Manila, I greet you all, time zone to time zone, all 24 of them, or however many there are. Morning, noon, nighttime, whatever it is where you are, doesn't matter. Here's where I am. I'm Art Bell, and this, of course, is the biggest, the most interesting program of its kind on the face of the planet. It's called Coast to Coast AM. Great to be here. My honor and privilege to be escorting you throughout the weekend. John Mark Carr, the suspect in the killing of 6-year-old John Benet Ramsey, arrived late Sunday after a 15-hour flight from Thailand on which he sipped champagne, get this, dined on fried king prawns and roast duck, oh my gosh, and exchanged what he described as small talk with law enforcement escorts. Carr voluntarily returned to the U.S., was not handcuffed in his business class seat, was expected to be extradited by Los Angeles authorities pending a hearing on extradition then to Boulder, Colorado, where authorities have indeed issued an arrest warrant for him. Lebanon's defense minister said Sunday that he is certain Hezbollah will not break the ceasefire, but he warned all militant groups of harsh measures and a traitor's fate should they incite Israeli retribution by firing rockets into the Jewish state. So in other words, don't start it again. A Missouri man who police say confessed to killing, dismembering, and then burning the bodies of 7 men in his bedroom fireplace. You know, these kinds of stories. 7 men in his bedroom fireplace, was charged Sunday with 1 count of murder. Michael Lee Shaver, Jr., 33, charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action related to a killing around fall of 2001. Shaver, who police say spontaneously confessed after he was arrested following a failed carjacking, told investigators he had shot and then killed 7 people at his residence during drug transactions so he could take their money and their drugs. Boy. Senator Joe Lieberman, attacked by fellow Democrats as being too close to the White House on the Iraq War, on Sunday called on Defense Secretary Rumsfeld to resign, said the U.S. cannot simply walk away from the Iraqis. Isn't the world news wonderful? Or this, from Texas. 3 police officers and a state trooper were shot and wounded Sunday afternoon, and the alleged gunman died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, ending a standoff that lasted more than 8 hours, according to police there. Police said the siege began when the officers were called to an apartment complex because of a report of a broken window. Looking at it, they figured out it was had been shot out. They went to the apartment. Gunfire appeared to come from the apartment. Somebody began opening fire on them, always a bad idea with regard to the police. And so he's now gone. More rain on the way to flooded Alaska. It's bad in Alaska. It's going to get worse. More rain on the way. Trilby Lundberg. You may have heard that name. Not Trilby, but Lundberg. The nation's guru of gasoline prices has no idea how many miles her new Mercedes-Benz at that, gets per gallon when she fills her tank, but she's more concerned with convenience and price. Yet for decades, the nation has turned to the assertive 57-year-old cat lover, bless her heart, and her twice-monthly Lundberg survey of gas stations to keep track of the fluctuating price of gasoline. Lately, of course, the news has not been good, nor is much of any of the national news. In a moment, we'll look at the rest of the news. I think it is so appropriate that somebody, a chain like Denny's would sponsor the first hour of the show here on the weekends, all night, available all night long, just as this program is. You know, I also want to take a second out, just before I plunge away here, and thank the Nevada Broadcasters Association that last night inducted me into their Hall of Fame. Makes one feel old. I am old. Nevertheless, it is a great honor, and thank you very much. Now, for the amateur radio operators out there, the aficionados of shortwave and those who watch the sun, on July 31st, it may not seem like much, a little tiny sunspot was born. Not that sunspots actually get born, but it's just a word. It popped up from the sun's interior, floated around a little bit, then vanished again in just a few hours on the sun. This sort of thing happens all the time, and ordinarily, well, it just wouldn't even be worth mentioning. But this sunspot was rather special. It was an absolutely backwards sunspot. Now, that really is important. According to David Hathaway, he said, "We've been waiting for this." A solar physicist at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, said a backward sunspot's a sign the next solar cycle is beginning. The tiny backward sunspot of July 31st, backward means magnetically backward. Sunspots are planet-sized magnets created by the sun's inner magnetic dynamo. Like all magnets in the universe, sunspots are north and south magnetic poles. They have them both. The sunspot of July 31st popped up at solar latitude 65 west, 13 south. Sunspots in that area are normally oriented north-south. The newcomer, however, was oriented south-north, opposite of the norm. The tiny spot of backwardsness matters because of what it might foretell a really big solar cycle. Now, that's something we've been hoping for, ham radio operators. Solar activity rises and falls, of course, in 11-year cycles, swinging back and forth between times of quiet and, well, great storminess. Right now, the sun is very quiet. We're near the end of solar cycle 23. That peaked back in 2001. Next cycle 24 should begin any time now. Returning the sun to a very stormy state. Satellite operators and NASA mission planners are bracing for this next solar cycle because it's expected to be exceptionally stormy. Perhaps, get this, the stormiest in decades. Sunspots and solar flares will return in abundance, producing bright auroras on Earth and dangerous proton storms in space. But when will 24 begin? Says Hathaway. Maybe it just did. The first spot of a new solar cycle is always backwards. Solar physicists have long known that sunspot magnetic fields reverse polarity from cycle to cycle. North-south becomes south-north and vice versa. The backward sunspot may be the first sunspot of cycle 24. It sounds exciting, but there are cautions. First, the sunspot lasted only 3 hours. Typically, sunspots last days, weeks, or even months. 3 hours is fleeting in the extreme. It came and went so fast it was not even given an official number, says Hathaway. The astronomers who number sunspots did not think it worthy. Kind of like stripping Pluto of its planetary status. Second, the latitude of the spot is somewhat suspicious. New cycle sunspots almost always pop up in mid-latitudes around 30 degrees north, 30 degrees south. In that area, the backward sunspot is was actually for a short time at 13 south. That's very strange. The oddisms stop Hathaway short of declaring the onset of a new solar cycle, but he says it looks promising. Even if cycle 24 truly has begun, don't expect any great storms right away. Solar cycles last 11 years, take time to build up to a fever pitch for a while, perhaps 1 or 2 years. Cycle 23 and 4 will actually share the sun, making a hodgepodge of backward and forward spots. Eventually, cycle 24 will take over completely, and then the fireworks begin. You never know what you're going to get digging through the U.S. patent files, and it has been discovered that Samsung has filed one of their own in hopes of using, now get this, folks, of using the atmosphere as an antenna. Researchers and employees in Korea are devising a method to use the ionosphere, the layer of atmosphere around 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, as a medium for long-distance communication without the need for expensive satellites. Now, of course, the ionosphere already plays a role in communications as a radio reflector. It bounces low-frequency radio signals from sea to shining sea, but by launching UHF signals behind a 1 gigahertz carrier signal, scientists are thinking they can alter the behavior of the ionosphere to create an alternating current which then can be modulated at a particular frequency in order to create an antenna of global proportions. While the precise utility of such a thing is not yet clear, it's interesting that it's in the works, apparently. Is Nessie real? She was once and could be again. Whether or not the huge creature known as the Loch Ness Monster is a living dinosaur, we do know that millions of years ago, huge carnivorous reptiles resembling Nessie lived in Australia. If the current Nessie is not real, we may soon be able to recreate her. Now, what do you think of that idea? A scientific breakthrough in DNA is going to make it possible for creatures that have been extinct for, well, since the Ice Age, about 30,000 years ago, to roam the Earth again. Like Nessie does now? Question mark. This comes from Whitley Strieber's Unknown Country. BBC News quotes researcher Australian Benjamin Keir as saying, "Imagine a compact body with 4 flippers, a reasonably long neck, small head, short tail, much like a reptilian seal. This creature grew to be around 16 feet long, had incredibly sharp teeth, so maybe we should hope that today's Nessie is a myth." Mark Henderson writes in the London Times that the woolly mammoth, which had been extinct for a much shorter time, around 30,000 years, could roam the Earth once more if DNA researchers can use frozen sperm. Yes, they have frozen sperm found inside a long-dead mammoth to produce offspring in surrogate mother animals. Maybe the Loch Ness Monster is a similar situation that somehow happened naturally. What do you think? Should we bring something like that back? Or how about this for a headline? Blood-sucking chupacabra goes on rampage in Russian villages, many of which I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. In Russia, the first evidence has appeared of a half-mythical creature which apparently sucks blood from animals, even large ones. Abroad, it is known under the name chupacabra. No one knows for certain what it looks like, but in 2005, a farmer in Texas caught in a trap, something looking very much like a cross between a bald dog, a rat, and a kangaroo, which apparently was sucking blood out of his chickens and turkeys, and now a mystery bloodsucker has appeared around Orenburg. The worries began at the end of March 2005, not far from the regional center, where they lost 32 turkeys. The bodies of the birds found in the morning had been completely drained of blood. None of the farmers either heard or saw the beasts that killed them. Then, in the village of Grabvokia, sheep fell victim to a nighttime vampire. Now, that's getting bigger. The unknown animal was also in the hamlets of Latakinsha and Sherma, Sherma, I guess. In the course of the night, 3 to 4 sheep or goats perished. Altogether, the losses in the region amounted to 30 small horned cattle. So there have been any number of witnesses to this. Any number of farmers have seen this bloodsucker, and it may well be that the now infamous chupacabra has indeed made another showing. If we can ever identify the genetic and psychological traits that make people criminals, especially killers, we may be able to lock them away before they kill again, or kill even the first time. This theme was explored several years ago in the film, remember Minority Report? Now it is apparently becoming real. In the West, courts have always incarcerated people according to the severity of their crimes, rather than on the likelihood of committing future offenses, even though every policeman and judge will say they can spot an offender who will commit more crimes in the future. The parole system uses a series of judgments based on judicial experience in order to decide who should be let out of prison early. It starts with the death penalty. This type of assessment can spell the difference between a death sentence and life spent in prison. It seems as though about 5% of all those who commit crimes continually, in other words, that is about 70%, frankly, of all crimes are committed by about 5% of the people, and now they're beginning to get a genetic handle on it all. Man-made global warming leads to higher ocean surface temperatures, which in turn creates more and stronger hurricanes, as well as other so-called natural disasters like forest fires, droughts, and floods. The BBC News is reporting, notice we always have to get this from the BBC, that climatologists say that global warming will increase the risk of forest fires, droughts, and floods over the next 200 years, even if we cut greenhouse gas emissions right now. So I suppose that would add to the argument that would say, what the hell, it's too late anyway. Hurricanes are getting stronger, as you know, more frequent. Global warming warms the surface of the ocean, feeding the storms, which then in turn cause devastation when they move inland. But this is is the actual ocean surface temperature a result of natural changes or greenhouse gases or both? They now apparently think both. Scientists think they have now found a gene, speaking of genes, that helped the human brain evolve, or did help it, from our chimp-like ancestors in just a very few million years. One area of the human genome seems to have evolved about 70 times faster than the rest of our genetic code. It appears to have a role in a rapid tripling of the size of the brain's crucial cerebral cortex, according to an article being published in the very famous journal Nature, looking at 49 areas that have changed the most between the human and chimpanzee genomes. They have found a dramatic change in a relatively short period of time in one area. That one gene did not exist until, get this, 300 million years ago, and is present only in mammals and birds. But then, after that, it did not change much at all. And then finally, this for you, entitled Lizard Birthing. If you have raised kids, or ever been one, and gone through the pet syndrome, including, of course, toilet flush burials for dead goldfish, the story below is going to have you laughing and possibly on the floor. Overview. I had to take my son's lizard to the vet. Here's what happened. Just after dinner one night, my son came to tell me that there was something wrong with one of the two lizards that he holds prisoner in his room. He's just lying there and looking sick, he told me. I'm serious, Dad. Can you help? Well, I put on my best lizard healer statement on my face, followed him into his bedroom. One of the little lizards was indeed lying on his back, looking stressed. I immediately knew what to do. Honey, I called, come look at the lizard. Oh, my gosh, my wife diagnosed after just a moment. She's having babies. What? My son demanded. Their names are Bert and Ernie, Mom. I was equally outraged. Hey, how can that be? I thought we said we didn't want them to reproduce, I accused my wife. Well, what do you want me to do? Post a sign on their cage? She inquired. I actually think she said this rather sarcastically. No, but you were supposed to get two boys, I reminded her in my most loving, calm, sweet voice while getting my teeth together and gritting. Yeah, Bert and Ernie, my son agreed. Well, it's just a little hard to tell on some guys, you know, she informed me, again with the sarcasm, you think? By now, the rest of the family had gathered to see what was going on. I shrugged, deciding to make the best of it. Kids, this is going to be a wondrous experience, I announced. We're about to witness the miracle of birth. Oh, gross, they shrieked. Well, isn't that just great? What are we going to do with a litter of tiny little lizard babies? My wife wanted to know. I really do think she was being snotty here, don't you? We peered at the patient. After much struggling, what looked like a tiny foot would briefly appear, vanishing a scant second later. I noted we don't appear to be making much progress. It's breech, my wife whispered, horrified. Do something, Dad, my son urged. Okay. Squeamishly, I reached in and grabbed the foot when it next appeared. Giving it a gentle tug, it disappeared. I tried several more times with the same result. Should I call 911? My eldest daughter wanted to know. Maybe they could talk us through the trauma. You see a pattern here with the females in my house? Let's get Ernie to the vet, I said grimly. We drove to the vet with my son holding the cage in his lap. Breathe, Ernie, breathe, he urged. I don't think lizards do Lamaze, his mother noted to him. Women can be so cruel to their young. I mean, What she does to me is one thing, but this boy is of her womb, for God's sakes. The vet took Ernie back to the examining room, peered at the little animal through a magnifying glass. What do you think, Doc? A C-section, I suggested scientifically. Oh, very interesting, he murmured. Mr. and Mrs. Cameron, may I speak to you privately for a moment? I gulped, nodding for my son to step outside for just a moment, son. Is Ernie going to be okay? My wife asked. Oh, perfectly, the vet assured us. This lizard is not in labor. In fact, that isn't ever going to happen. You see, Ernie is a boy. Ernie is a young male, you see, and occasionally, as they come into maturity, like most male species, they masturbate, just the way he did. Lying on his back, he blushed, glancing at my wife. Well, you know what I'm saying, Mrs. Cameron. We were silent, absorbing all of this. So Ernie's just excited, my wife offered. Exactly, the vet replied, relieved that we understood. More silence. Then my vicious, cruel wife started to giggle and giggle, then laugh loudly. What's so damn funny, I demanded, knowing but not believing that the woman I married would commit the upcoming affront to my flawless manliness. Tears now running down her face, laughing is just... Actually, the other side of the world... Well, in a moment, we will go to open lines, so if you've got something you want to get on the air, something really interesting, grab one and join us to finish up the lizard story, mercifully cut off by that commercial break, with the wife simply laughing hysterically. The husband announced, "That's enough. That's enough." We thanked the vet and hurriedly bundled the lizards and our son back into the car. And he was glad that everything was going to be okay. He said, "I know Ernie's really thankful for what you've done, Dad," he told me. Oh, you have no idea, at which point the wife once again collapsed with laughter. Moral of the story, 2 lizards, $140. 1 cage, $50. Trip to the vet, $30. Memory of your husband pulling on a lizard's winky, priceless. Moral of the story, finish biology class. Lizards lay eggs. All right, as advertised, we're about to plunge into open lines. I want to remind you that next weekend I have petitioned for a night of open lines. Now, you may want to take the week to prepare the stories that I'm looking for. I'm going to be looking for stories of people who have experienced another dimension. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean consciously experienced another dimension. I understand that many have had sleep experiences in which they think they've experienced another dimension, but we're going to skip over that one and hopefully not get people who call up and say, well, you know, I had a dream. I am convinced, as are, by the way, most modern theoretical physicists, that there are as many as 11, if not more, additional dimensions out there than ours. And so obviously, from time to time, if you believe half the stories or a quarter of the stories that we get here, people have visited briefly on occasion or perhaps at some length other dimensions. And I would like those stories, and we'll be soliciting those stories during an open line segment next week, as well as whatever else you would like to talk about. So anybody who feels they have actually, for a short or long time, consciously experienced another dimension, we're going to be looking for you on one of the days of next weekend. In the meantime, east of the Rockies, you are on the air. Hello.
Good morning, Art. A pleasure to talk with you.
And with you, sir.
A long time ago, in a loser's paradise, the folks looked down at their tiny television sets and concluded that the grass really is greener on the other side, and they tore down the Berlin Wall. With your electronic experience and broadcast genius, could you come up with some modern thing, a video phone or whatever, that would essentially trigger the Islamic Renaissance has been delayed by 1,000 years. Start in Mindanao by sending them some kind of kits. We could give everybody $1,000 device compared to what we're doing right now in a futile expense.
I wish what you suggest would be possible. I wish that there was some way of changing the minds and the hearts of those who want us dead. He mentioned Mindanao down to it's one of the southernmost islands of the Philippine chain, and there is indeed activity going on down there and has been for years now. And of course, Islamic radical activity going on in many, many parts of the world. Can we change those minds and hearts? I don't think so. I think this is one of those things where these folks either want us converted, and they've pretty well given up on that concept, or they want us dead. Now, when you get to the point where somebody wants you to believe as they believe or die, then I guess you've got a situation where you're at war, whether you like it or not. And the answer, of course, is not. We don't like it. But believing as we do, as Americans do, and loving freedom as we do, I think this is one war that is absolutely, completely unavoidable. You're not going to change those hearts and those minds through all the video conferences or things that you might send. And so you're going to have to fight this war. The West is going to have to eventually, and I'm sure it will, make up its mind that, and to some degree already has, we just don't advertise it, that we are going to fight that war. And we're certainly not going to convert, are we? West of the Rockies, you are on the air. Good morning.
This West of the Rockies?
It is.
Hi, Art. This is Mike. Nice talking to you again. I'm
Hey,
the
Mike.
gentleman that you played the exorcism tape about 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Remember?
Okay. Yeah, I do.
I just thought I was praying on a prayer line for a certain ministry one time, and this is an exorcism on an animal. And
No. Don't play it for me.
No. I haven't.
Okay. Is it an exorcism for an animal?
Yeah. She had donated some money to the ministry, and ever since that day, her little dog had been sick, And she told me, she said, I know it's the devil. I said, well, it could be. I said, let me pray. And I started praying. I said, is he in the room? She said, yes. I said, after I prayed, I said, what's he doing? She said, he's shaking violently. I said, okay. I said, I'm going to pray again. So I started the exorcism. And then after I was done, I said, what's he doing now? She said, he got up, he walked over to me, his tail is wagging, he sat down, and he has tears in his eyes. I said, take him for a walk because he's free.
So there you have it, the story of a freed pooch, I guess. Can the devil inhabit an animal, a dog? Well, I suppose so. If one is given to believe that animals might have souls, and I'm certainly given to believe that, then I guess I would have to believe that they could potentially be inhabited by an evil force, I guess. A first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
My entire life, I have experienced shadow people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really sure, I haven't really listened to any of your broadcasts about shadow people or anything, so, what exactly are they?
If I knew that, I wouldn't be doing shows on them, I suppose. I have no idea what they are. They're probably spirits or souls, or perhaps even aliens, and they're probably operating on another dimensional frequency, one that we rarely see. There are people like yourself who claim to see them almost constantly, but that's pretty rare. So we don't know what they are, dear. Sorry if that stops you cold, but we don't know. Well, I guess she just went away. I'm sorry I couldn't give you a better answer than that, but obviously that's one of the things that we explore on this program. And that was the best description I'm able to give. These are creatures or spirits that are seen usually, as I mentioned yesterday, in peripheral vision, occasionally straight on by people like that young lady who just called and was too shy to go beyond that. But we don't know. The answer is we don't know what they are. Wildcard line, you are on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art. This is Bob.
Hey,
in
Bob.
Orlando.
Yes.
Are you still interested in pirates?
Pirates?
Yeah, you were interested a few years ago. I'm a treasure hunter.
Uh-huh.
And I've got your address over in Pahrump, but obviously you've moved.
A
You
mile or
said to
two,
send you
yes.
the stuff. When I've got the stuff, but don't think it's going to make it all the way to Manila.
Well, when you say you've got the stuff, what specifically is the stuff?
I've been excavating an old pirate ship sunk off the Florida Keys.
Were these pirates who had, done well?
Well, they'd done well supposedly until the U.S. Navy caught up with them in 1834.
I see. And obviously sunk them. No, but the question was really, was the ship filled with booty?
Yes.
So the stuff you refer to is gold and jewels and that sort of thing?
Yeah, a few coins. Not that I haven't found any jewels, found coins. We're still looking for the jewels, trust me.
I'm sure you are. Much like the gold that never reached me, from Ed Dames, I don't know what to say, but if you feel so inclined to send some coins and or jewels when you come across them along my way, just send them to the network and they'll forward them on or not.
Is your house still exist over in your address still exists over in Pahrump?
Yes, of course it does. Yes.
Okay, can I send it there?
I see no reason why not. Yes.
Okay. I'm
okay.
Curious, you never talk
all
about
right. Thank
anymore.
you. And why don't I talk about? Well, when pirates come up, I'll talk about them. I guess there hasn't been a lot of pirate news lately. Actually, I think the last pirate story ended rather grimly for the pirates. I think it was off the coast of Africa, and if I recall correctly, a U.S. naval vessel put them down to Davy Jones' locker rather quickly. Wildcard line, you are on the air. Hello.
How you doing, Art? This is Joe. I'm in Ohio.
Yes, sir.
And I want to tell you about a ghost cat story.
A ghost cat story, okay.
Yeah, me and my wife, we was out checking out some hauntings one night, and we came back to the motel, and I laid down before she did and everything, and she said we had cats with us, and she put them in the cage for the night. And I was sleeping, and while I was sleeping, I felt the presence of a cat kneading on me. And I asked her the next morning, and she said she put the cat, in the cage right after I went to bed. And the next night, it happened to her. The cat was meowing in her face, the ghost cat.
Yeah, and obviously there was no real cat there, right?
There was nothing there.
Okay, well, what you have just described actually is awfully common. I'm convinced that animals do come back in spirit. I have a cat, Yeti. My Yeti crawls into bed with me just about nightly and crawls under the covers and kneads my stomach until Yeti is satisfied. I'm sure that it goes back to kittyhood. And I'm not sure what it is, but I can tell you this, that it satisfies him tremendously. After he has kneaded my stomach for the appointed amount of time, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 sessions before he's satisfied, he's purring, and he's kind of off in another little world for a while. In fact, he's sort of confused. As he slowly comes out of the covers, I'm forced to kind of hold him on my chest for a while, and he just sort of lays there in kind of a state of contented confusion. And then eventually he'll realize, sort of shake himself and realize it's the real world, and will then crawl off to his little soft appointed bed over in the corner. But he really needs that. It means an awful lot to him, and I've always seen to it that he gets it when he needs it. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hey, Art Bell.
Yes, hello.
I've been abducted by aliens.
How long ago?
I can't remember.
You cannot remember?
I know it was I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago.
2 or 3 years ago. And do you recall what they did?
They took me while I was sleeping. I woke up in their ship, and they started talking. And they said,
Do you recall what they said to you?
They asked them, did they mean any harm? They said, no, they didn't. And then they put a probe up my nose.
Up your nose?
Yes.
That's a sort of story that really puts a very bad light on aliens indeed. I've never been a fan of probes in the nose, or any other orifice for that matter. And it also tends to make me not think they're the warm little fuzzy creatures that everybody thinks they are. What do you think? I'd give it about a 50-50 possibility that they're the warm, fuzzy little creatures depicted in so many science fiction movies. I rather think not. Well, let's see. Let's go to the first-time caller line. You're on the air. Hello. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know if I was on. I listen to your program all the time, and I think it's real good.
Well, it's very
different.
different.
Experience. I was in a real bad car wreck.
Yes, sir.
And I was on the operating table, and they say my heart stopped. I left my body. I come out through the back of my body, and I was above the operating table, and I could see the doctors working, and I could see the nurses, and I kept going up, and I went up through the ceiling, and I started going up above it, and the hospital started getting smaller and smaller, and I went up further in the sky, and the state started getting smaller and smaller, and pretty soon I could see the continent getting smaller.
May I ask you a question? Were you fully conscious during this experience? In other words, were you saying to yourself, my God, I probably just died, and I'm rising above a hospital, and here I am rising now above the earth? I mean, were you thinking those things as it was occurring?
Yes, sir. In fact, I was kind of scared at first, and then I could look at my body, and I had multicolored, like electrical charges all over me. And as I was floating, going up, I had a knowledge of everything. It seemed like I had some kind of a universal knowledge of everything, of creation, of electromagnetic, of anything that I could think of, I had an answer for.
Yes, sir.
And I kept going, and I left the planet, and it started getting smaller, and I was floating out in darkness. I was going by these colored lights. They're like rungs of light. They're round, and they were horizontal. And on the ends were like stars. And then they had lights that went back to the horizon that looked like railroad tracks going way back in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
And as I passed by each one of these rungs of lights, it was making the most prettiest music I ever heard. And I went beyond them lights, and I was still going. And I started seeing dark shapes and shadows and things. I started getting scared. So I started praying real hard, and all of a sudden there was an explosion of colored lights. And I was standing in this field of multicolored flowers, and they were like rainbow colors. Some had more colors than others, and you could distinguish them apart. The sky was white, and the best way I could describe that was like looking through your eyelash in the sunlight, and you could see rainbow colors.
Sure.
And while I was standing there, I heard a voice, and I believe the sky that was white was God, and he was talking to me. And he told me, "It's your time, my son." And I said, "Father, it's not fair. I've had such a rough childhood, and I've had a rough life. And I prayed and asked you to bring me a wife, and you brought me a wife, and now you want to take me away from her." And he says, "If you go back and you tell people the second coming is at hand, I'll let you live." And I said, "Yes, Father." The next thing I know, I hit the top of my head, and I filled my body up, and I was back in my body again.
And that accounts for why you're now on a international show telling us this story, because you're required to talk about the second coming. How soon do you feel it may occur?
Well, this was done about maybe about 30 years ago. But time really is nothing to God, you know.
So I've heard. Yes.
But
So
I believe
it could be any
the way
time.
things are going in the Middle East and everything's going on, it's got to be soon.
It could be soon, sir. There's no question about it. It is said no man shall know the time, so I'm surprised he indicated to you that the time was nigh. At any rate, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Freddy Silva is going to be here. Now, Freddy Silva abandoned a rather lucrative career to begin a study of crop circles, one of the greatest mysteries of our time. He's quite knowledgeable in the field, and anybody who gives up a lot of money to study something like crop circles deserves a listening. He's coming up next. This is Coast to Coast AM. It is indeed. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, as the case may be, across the face of the globe, everybody. One of the greatest mysteries of our time. Clearly, along with animal mutilations, would be crop circles. Now, we all know that not all of them are the real McCoy, but obviously some are. And here comes a man who has devoted his life to a study of them. His name is Freddy Silva. Freddy Silva first began researching crop circles in 1990, and as his fascination with the subject has grown, therefore, his career in modern commerce has plummeted. However, Freddy is today one of the world's foremost experts on crop circles, sacred space, and consciousness. He is the best-selling author of Secrets in the Fields, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles, hailed by many as the most comprehensive and multidisciplinary study ever undertaken into this fascinating phenomenon. He's also released the DVD documentary, Stairways to Heaven, The Practical Magic of Sacred Space, written and directed by himself. Freddy is a lifelong student of Earth mysteries, sacred space, and ancient systems of knowledge. Coming up in a moment, Freddy Silva. First of all, anybody who gives up a successful life in modern commerce, in other words, making money, to study crop circles has really got to be devoted to the subject. Freddy Silva, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Art. How are you?
I'm quite well. Where are you located?
Right now I'm in, I was going to say sunny Portland, Maine, but it's not sunny yet. But it will be by the time we finish with the interview.
All right. Well, I had not looked at the phone number associated with your appearance, and the accent said to me, oh, my gosh, he's in Great Britain or perhaps Australia. I don't discern that carefully. Freddie, why in the world would somebody turn from a successful career making money into a full-time study of something like, fascinating as it is, crop circles?
Well, Art, I think 10 years later, I'm still asking myself the same question, but the fringe benefits have been so wonderful, the things I've experienced, the things I've seen, and, of course, the people I've met along the way, that the commercial side of it always is a bit of a problem with people doing this kind of research. It's always a struggle every day, every month, but somehow it seems to work. The numbers somehow end up in your favor at some point along the way. But there was something that I saw many years ago when I was actually living in Chicago back in 1990. And I saw this image on television, and it just turned me. I had no idea what it was doing to me, what it was saying. I just knew what I was looking at was something that was of great benefit to humanity, and that was my first involvement with the phenomenon of crop circles, even though I was watching this thing on television. I had no idea if this was land art or people had sort of gone around with a lawnmower and made this incredible design in the field somewhere. I was actually ironing a shirt at the time with the sound turned off, but I knew exactly what I was looking at when I saw that first picture. And the funny thing is that the more people that I've met on my journey, the more they tell me exactly the same story, that it's happened to them in the same way, as if these messages are unlocking some kind of memory inside of human beings, and it's getting them to wake up and recognize their purpose in life.
I also have had fairly profound feelings when looking at some of the crop circles, and of course I've seen most of them over the years, Freddie. I am curious, what percentage, Freddie, of the crop circles that show up on a yearly basis do you think are genuine? And when I say genuine, of course, I mean not made by man.
It's difficult to say. It sort of brings back the old argument when Colin Andrews came up with that 80-20 theory a few years ago, which caused no end of confusion. It's very difficult to say because you'd have to have been a person who has gone into every single one of them. I'm talking about 11,000 reports in 29 countries, going back just to 1980 at least. Of course, they go back to at least 1682. But you'd have to analyze every single one of them, and this has been a growing phenomenon. There's been a growing education along the way. I have to say, just looking at what I know and what I've experienced, that up to about 1991, I'd say virtually 95% were all genuine. The hoaxing was so rare in those days. You could really tell what was man-made just by the mess that was being made. But I think what happened was, historically, as the crop circles began to grow in popularity, and it almost became a religion by the time we had, the big Barbary Castle tetrahedron, the very famous tetrahedral design.
Of course, yes.
That everybody seems to react to in a very positive way. That's when I think the authorities got very anxious that something out of control was taking place, and that's when the whole concept of Doug and Dave was invented. Because the whole story of Doug and Dave can be traced back to the British Ministry of Defence to some reliable degree, and then something very weird happened around about 92 and 93. When all the media really was agog with all this concept that two guys had made up to that point about 5,000 circles on their own, which just logistically is ludicrous. The phenomenon seems to have retreated for a couple of years, and during 92, 93, most crop circles were definitely man-made by just pranksters and people out for a good time. And then it had a resurgence in 94. 95, 96 were growing years. 97 was very strong. And then around 99, 2001, we started seeing another ebb. And I'd say, hand on heart, that the last truly major design in Britain was in 2003. And the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of nonsense, a lot of construction lines, a lot of mechanical evidence on the ground. So it seems to go up and down. It has an ebb and flow, just like a tide, as if it's actually obeying some kind of natural principle as well. So it is difficult to put a number on it. But
you mentioned Colin Andrews in 80-20. What was that?
A few years ago, Colin did a study of all kinds of elements that were taking place inside the crop circles, most notably the magnetic field deviation that seemed to happen inside the genuine ones. And he announced to the world that 80% of the world's crop circles were man-made. Now, all this was taken out of context because what he was trying to say was that during the years 1999 to 2001, of all the crop circles that he had personally analyzed, which could have been anywhere to about 30 to 40% of all of those in England, of all of those analyzed, 80% showed mechanical flattening processes which could be attributed to human beings, whereas the 20% that he'd analyzed actually had showed signs of a natural phenomenon that was guided by some kind of intelligence force. And that was what sort of threw people off. That suddenly they realized that so many were being man-made. But by that time, by around the year 2000, there was a lot of people that were out there with planks, and some of them were using garden rollers, for heaven's sake. It was ridiculous. And but people seem to have forgotten the fact that of those 20%. Represented quite a large, significant number where the forces of nature were being manipulated to an extraordinary degree that were leaving all kinds of interesting effects behind. And
for example, I recall that in what were considered to be genuine crop circles, there was a, what do I say, genetic change? There was a change in the, that could only have been matched by, for example, crops that have been put in a microwave oven and exposed to microwave energy. Is that correct?
I mean, my theory actually goes slightly the other way, but it's very similar. What was happening is that the plants in the genuine circles to this day exhibit some kind of cellular change at the microscopic level. The same is happening to the soil, where the crystalline structure of the soil has been altered, and that would require atmospheric pressure of about 5 atmospheres, coupled with an intense heat of about 1,500 degrees Celsius. And I looked at microwave originally, which is what Dr. Levengood was looking at for many, many years, but I couldn't understand how microwave could be capable of leaving behind nothing but a lot of damaged plants, because microwave is very damaging. And I began to look at sound in all its many other facets, and I actually discovered that the effects of ultrasound and infrasound, which is a sound above and below the human hearing range, actually generated the exact same effects as microwave, but without all the nasty side effects. And it actually was able to even manipulate the plants at the chromosome level, and even create the kind of charring effect that we see in the genuine plants too.
And what kind of frequency and decibel level of sound would do this?
Above the human hearing range, we're talking about the megahertz range, which are the kind of frequencies that we keep picking up in the genuine circles. Usually anything over 250 megahertz. So it's way, way above our level of an ability to hear. And that,
yes, way above. Way above.
Very, very high, unless you're actually way above even dogs, I think. But at that range, the frequencies start to actually do strange things, and that is that they're actually capable of altering your state of awareness. And, of course, there's been so many hundreds of people that have experienced that in the crop circles to begin with. The other end of the range, which is the infrasound, is below 20 hertz. And at that point, when you attach 5 atmospheric pressure to sound, what happens is that the sound wave traveling through a liquid inside the stem is capable of boiling the water inside the stem in about 1 nanosecond. And
let me stop you and just make absolutely sure of what you said. You said that one range seems to be in the area of 250 megahertz. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right, that's a radio frequency. That's so far above sound. That's a radio frequency. 20 hertz is extremely low. 20 hertz is not all that far from the Schumann resonance frequency, just down below that, right?
Exactly. And it's a very short wave, but the trick is when you actually couple atmospheric pressure with that wave, that's what creates the heating that takes place inside the stems, which is why in the genuine circles the plants are charred on the outside, and also the liquid's been expelled from the plant. And we can tell that from the little blowholes that appear in the nodes of the plants, where the water literally, when it's actually boiled, just like when you're making tea,
it virtually explodes, right?
Yeah, it expands, and it has to look for the weakest part of the plant, which is the node, and it blows a hole, just like in the film Alien, and the water comes out. And it also accounts for the fact that many of the farmers who see the crop circles at, say, at 5:30 in the morning in their fields, they report steam coming out of them, columns of steam coming out of the circles. And, of course, infrasound at that range actually is able to create an atomization of the water molecule, so it will create steam.
All right. Wouldn't it be true, Freddie, that any biological entity who'd be on the ground in the area of the crop circles, if something like that were used, would also virtually be boiled alive?
They wouldn't. They would have a nice, pleasant headache. Yes, in fact, I went into a crop circle in 2003. Ironically, it was shaped. Actually, no, 2002. I beg your pardon. And it was actually shaped like a shell. And I actually found for the first time of hundreds of visits, hundreds upon hundreds of snails on the ground, all boiled alive. I mean, it was almost like a feast. Unfortunately, they weren't good enough to eat. But the only fatality that's ever been associated with a crop circle directly was actually in the Canadian prairie, where a farmer came out one day, saw a crop circle on his land, and he saw the typical swirled pattern floor. And along with the swirled crop, he found a series of very long quills that stretched from outside the perimeter of the flattened area and it followed the swirl right down to the center. And when he followed the quills, he actually found at the very end of those quills a very flat and very dead and mummified Canadian porcupine, which they're about 30 pounds up in the prairie. They're very, very big creatures. And that, again, testified to the incredible acoustic pressure that was generated at the time that was able to flatten a 30-pound porcupine. And, of course, the whole thing was that the actual ability of infrasound to release the water molecule and nullify it meant that the poor creature had been mummified. I mean, all the water inside its body had been completely expelled, and for weeks and weeks afterwards, the creature did not even emit any odor. So it actually increased the mummification process. So in a way, it kind of died to prove the point that not only was pressure being used in the process, but also there was a huge amount of heating taking place in a very short space of time.
All right, Freddie, let me ask you this. I'm sure you're well aware of the HARP project ongoing in Alaska, the ionospheric heater. It actually heats the ionosphere, and it's capable of blowing a hole in the ionosphere. Conceivably, the HARP project, Freddie, is capable of modulation of the kinds of frequencies that you're talking about right now. And, of course, it's a relatively secret project. I mean, there's a very public aspect to it, but we all know that DARPA is involved, and there's a very secret aspect to it. Is it possible, Freddie, that the HARP project or a project like it is producing these?
I thought about that for many, many years. And, again, like you say, it's very difficult to prove some of these things because they are so secret. So you can only sort of surmise and put one and one together and see where the logic trail leads. And logically thinking, I mean, the military usually tends to do things very quietly and in great secret. And to leave these fingerprints all around the world, and like I said, in 29 countries now, 11,000 of these designs, it doesn't seem very secret. And to me, it would seem highly unlikely that they would be experimenting with something and leaving so much of a trail behind, especially when scientists have been able to figure out that strange things are happening to the plants or the soil and even the watershed with which the energy interacts. So I would tend to favor another source for this, a very non-mechanical source.
Okay. Maybe you can give us all some idea, Freddie, of the percentage of crop circles that have made their appearance in Great Britain and surrounding that rough geographic area as compared to the rest of the world.
It seems to be about a ratio of about 85% in the south of England, typically in the areas bordered by the old Kingdom of Wessex, which today is Wiltshire, Hampshire, and parts of Sussex. It's a very, very old area of the world. It's a huge chalk bed. In fact, it's about, I believe it's over 800 feet of chalk. It's the world's deepest chalk aquifer. And ironically enough, the other great percentage of concentration of reported crop circles, about 15%, actually happens over the Canadian prairie, which is a limestone aquifer, which happens to be the chemical twin of chalk. So they seem to favor aquiferous ground for some interesting reason. And the rest are sort of interspersed around the world. There are more reports coming out every year because people have finally begun to figure out who to tell. For example, a few years ago, it was discovered in South Africa. They've been appearing maybe for thousands of years. It's part of local folklore, and they're considered to be imprints and signs of the gods. And when these things appear, it's a great time of festivity. I mean, the local tribes actually fence the designs in the maize, and they actually take 3 days out to honor the gods with with gifts, with food, with festivities, and give them thanks for a wonderful year. So
no, that's absolutely fascinating. I had not heard that this had gone on in Africa and that it had been received in the manner you just described. That really is fascinating. And while the British and some students in Britain might have the time and inclination to do this kind of thing, certainly they do not in Africa. So that's really interesting.
It is, and the way they also tackle it is very interesting. For example, I mean, now I live here in America. Many people are saying, well, why don't we have many more reports here? And I said, well, they're around. We just don't get to hear that much about them, and usually because people don't know who to tell. But then there are those who are very, very frightened by the whole thing because of their particular, ideological belief. And for example, in Indiana, where we had many circles in the past, the first thing that some of the farmers do is basically call the police, and the police will put crime seam tape around the design. Well, contrast that to these people in Africa who, they basically honor the site as a sacred space, and they don't go in there, and they honor it. It's a huge change of perception. And again, it shows that perhaps that there are places in the world where the phenomenon is much more welcome. And it shows, again, that there's a benevolence behind it, that if it feels like it's threatening people, perhaps it backs up a bit and lets people sort of think about it. It lets it sink into the local psyche before making another approach. And for me, it shows that there's a great benevolence attached to it.
Well, I suppose in America it's regarded as a crime against the farmer. In other words, they've destroyed a significant portion of some farmers' crops, right?
Which is understandable, although when you actually look carefully at the plants, if it's a genuine circle, nothing's actually been damaged at all. Very little, let's see, if you actually leave the plants to their own devices in the genuine circles, after a few days, they begin to react back up to the light, and they raise themselves almost like magic. So, again,
really?
There's no damage at all, absolutely. There's no damage has actually occurred to the plants whatsoever.
Even with the exploding seed pods, huh?
Exactly, and it seems to differ. I should qualify that, because when the energy interacts with the plants, when the plants are at an early level of maturity, that is when they're still fairly young, yes, there's very, very little damage that occurs, and the plants are able to reconstitute their mobility and raise themselves back up to the light. In fact, they start to outgrow the plants and the rest of the field, which have not been affected by the energy. But when the energy interacts with the plants, where it's at the later stage of development, then yes, because the plants are already very mature and very brittle, then yes, they will. It does actually stunt their growth.
All right, Freddie, hold tight for a moment. We're here at the bottom of the hour. Fascinating stuff. Obviously, not all crop circles are man-made. There's simply no question about it. Some of them are made by, well, maybe that'll be the next question for Freddie. From Manila in the Philippines, I'm Art Bell. There's absolutely no question about it. If you have taken the time and trouble to look at the many, many websites that carry wonderfully detailed photographs of crop circles, many of them, when you look at them, affect you profoundly. I mean, there's simply no question about it. Now, I don't know that I'm able to distinguish in my mind between the man-made and the others. We'll call them the others. They obviously are not man-made, but many of them do have a profound effect on you. They simply, there's no other way. I mean, some of them, 10 acres and larger, obviously not made by man. Question is, made by whom? We will ask. Of course, over the years, I've worked closely with Linda Moten Howe, and this has been one of her prime areas of investigation. Freddie, the two main questions about crop circles are who's making them, and, of course, what do they mean? Let's try the who part. Have you made any progress in your investigation at all with regard to who is doing this?
Very much so. In fact, it was one of the first things that intrigued me, and I came across very, very early on in my work on the transcripts of a renowned psychic in England called Isabelle Kingston, who has since become a great friend of mine, and I've worked with her closely for many, many years. And I was reading over some of the transcripts, and it gave me a lot of clues as to what was really going on. And just to quickly qualify this person, because obviously, there are good channelers and there are those are not so good, and there are good lawyers and not so good lawyers. So just to qualify her, she was a banker, so she's someone who obviously used a very analytical mind to make her living. And she developed her abilities to an incredible degree, where the police in England, when they're at a miss to find out who committed a certain crime or where a certain body is buried, they actually go and knock on her door, and she has a near 100% record of working with them, and always very, very quietly. She's very self-effacing, no great sense of self-importance, and, like the rest of us, doesn't make that much money either. So, she's someone who can be trusted, and having known her for many, many years, being privy to the information that she has revealed and actually having that information proved in front of me, for me, has been a great way to validate the information that she gets. So, back in 85, 86, 87, at a time in England when the words crop circle really were not heard. I mean, these things were happening, and it was a local folklore. It was very rare. Farmers had been used to these, what they called devil circles and witches' rings, all the way back into 1890. But it really was a sort of a rare and local phenomenon. And one day, she happened to have been in a channeling session. She was a trance medium, and she accidentally vectored in this information from a universal consciousness that called itself the Watchers, who actually seemed to pop in and out of our history all the way back to the Egyptian times. And back then, they were referred to as the Nethead, the creator gods. And they gave her all this information about this emerging phenomenon that would be making its appearance throughout Britain with geometric light structures based on sound. And when she sort of channeled this afterwards and they read the transcripts, the whole group was shaking their heads going, what on earth is this all about? And in the middle of the transcript, they said, well, within 7 days, we will give you a sign of our intent at the foot of your hill of Silbury, which is Europe's tallest man-made conical mound, a very enigmatic pyramid, if you like, in the south of England. So they decided to go at the base of Silbury Hill 7 days later, and lo and behold, those were the first series of what they call the Celtic cross crop circles, which is the central circle with the 4 little circles arranged like a cross. And that's when they realized, oh, that's a crop circle and a geometric light symbol. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I began to read all the transcripts with great interest to find out what this is all about, and began to realize that the information that she was receiving was getting validated more and more. I mean, she was predicting where they were going to appear, what they're going to look like. The timing was always a little bit off. It was always within 24 hours or 48 hours, but the information was getting predicted and also validated one day after the next. And so I began to take a lot more interest in this group consciousness and what they were involved with and the purpose to why they were making these shapes. And over the course of the years, I've been able to prove it bit by bit.
Okay, Freddie, again, the question was who, and you keep referring to we as you read the transcript. So who?
Well, like I said, it's a universal consciousness called the Watchers. And I'm sorry if I'm digressing. It's about 2:30 in the morning where I am, so thank you for bringing me back.
Okay, so is the who us? In other words, we are the consciousness, nearly as I can tell, here on Earth. So are you suggesting that this universal or group consciousness, that we are the ones doing this?
We are actually involved at a subconscious level, because what happened was, and again, going back to the transcripts, this universal consciousness was saying that we as a group consciousness, in other words, as a human consciousness, had asked for help. We were worried about the state of the world, and a great number of people, in other words, say 51% of the population of the world at some point in the 20th century, sent out through our prayers, through our thoughts, we asked for help from the outside to try and figure out that we had lost the plot down here, that we basically were making a mess of the whole earth. We were getting tired of this, this usage of a very few people in power who are controlling so many people, and basically creating the situation that we're in today. And this universal consciousness, and some people call it, they call them gods, they call them angels, some people even call them fairies. Okay. They basically have been around for millions of years, but essentially they are the core group of beings who are around and whose sole purpose it is to guide humanity through its more critical stages of development.
All right, then if I've heard you correctly, we essentially consciously or subconsciously prayed for help, recognizing the pathetic condition of our Earth currently, and I can certainly attest to that. And we're getting an answer, is what you're telling me. And so, okay, let's say that we are receiving an answer. Then, Freddie, how far have you come in discerning what we're being told?
Basically, because a lot of the symbols that began appearing in the early days could actually be deciphered by Aboriginal tribes and ancient tribes, because a lot of those symbols are actually etched into their rock art. It's etched into the memory of the tribe. I mean, there are many symbols that can, you show them to Aborigines, you show them to Navajo, to Hopi, and they'll say, oh, this means that. And that's where the first basis of the communication came about. We began to realize that this was an archetypal communication. The second part, and again going back to the transcripts, was that the information based on this that was coming from this group consciousness was veiled. In other words, the reason why they called themselves the Watchers was because they could not actually do anything for us. They could only help us and try and move us along. We would be doing the work ourselves. And so the symbols, they were saying, would work subconsciously. And that's when the geometers down here began to look at the symbols and recognize, well, wait a minute, the positioning of these circles, the positioning of these rings and these designs, there's something unusually harmonic about the designs. And they began to realize that they were absolutely coded with an invisible array of what we call sacred geometry. And that kind of geometry is actually inherent in our own DNA. When you actually take the human DNA molecule apart and look under the microscope at the crystalline structure, it's actually composed of hexagons and pentagrams stuck to each other. So all that geometry basically was encoded in these simple symbols, and it was talking to us subconsciously, and it was waking up part of the human psyche that basically had we just shut down for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And that's how I began to put the connection together, that people that went into the circles were saying, I've woken up, something has woken me up from something, and people could not understand it. Just in the same way that you and I have seen pictures on television, Art. And
we have. Freddie, is it necessary to get these conscious or subconscious messages to actually go to a circle, or is the viewing of one on a monitor or something sufficient to get the message across?
From my experience, it seems that as long as you don't actually distort the image, the original photograph, in other words, you don't put it through Photoshop and you squeeze it, as long as the original photograph, the imprint of the information retains itself in the actual image. So you can actually be, in the Philippines, look at a picture, and the information will transfer itself down. It'll download itself into you, and that's why you're having those experiences of memory. You recognize what you're looking at, but you can't quite logically explain it.
That's right. No, I described it as simply some of them have a profound effect on you. There's no question about it. Exactly. That's a conscious profound effect. Apparently, there's also a subconscious profound effect. Now, Freddie, you said that the Hopi and others have recognized some of these symbols. Can you do a simple translation for us on any of them?
It's not that quite sort of clear-cut. It's more to do with archetypal messages. I'm trying to think of one. For example, there was one in England which was... it was a sort of a elliptical head which is sort of bent to one side. It had four draping sort of feathers coming out of the central circle, and the actual line that connected the big circle to a smaller circle was also bent. And that was shown to, I believe, the Hopi, and they said that actually means Mother is crying. It's an image of the earth with its four elements on either side of the circle actually drooping, saying that the elements are under stress, and it's a message to us to say that Mother is crying, our Earth Mother is crying for help, and it's up to us to try and resume our responsibility for the Earth and take control of the situation and be more generous and to the planet that we're living in, so that we can take better care of it. So that's the kind of information. That's how they actually communicate. It's with archetypal symbols, almost like hieroglyphs. They are what they mean. They're like an encyclopedia of information in each symbol.
All right, that's very, very interesting, and it certainly makes sense to me. But the general public and certainly the media is not going to grasp that kind of subtlety, and that message is not going to be widely heard, Freddie, unless something big changes. In other words, if it remains this subtle, then crop circles are going to remain an interesting enigma that is not going to mean a whole lot to anybody.
And that's part of the frustration as well, even from my end. I would love for everybody to be able to just sort of get the message immediately and wake up and recognize that we're here to do something very, very big and very important in life, make a positive contribution. But as they were saying as well, the watchers were saying that not everybody is in on the same game plan because, I mean, we come down here as souls, trapped in a body, and we come down here to have an experience, and not everybody is having the same experience. I mean, there are some people who come down here to control people. There are some people who come here to create havoc and war, and then there are those who come here to make peace. So, and that's the whole myriad of being human. It comes down to the fact that we have choice, and what they're giving us is the possibility. They're waking us up to a greater possibility, and it's up to us to choose what we're going to do with it. So some people basically take on board the information, and they wake up, and like me, they give up a very good career, and they dedicate themselves to learning and to try to, to tell the truth to the best of their ability.
All right. Freddie, you said that, you said that with regard to the lady who had done the channeling, that she had proven to you, or that it had been proven to you, that what she was channeling was real or was accurate. In what manner was that proven to you, Freddie?
It was the way in which the information was given under trance, and that she was given the location and even the designs and positioning of where these shapes were going to be only within a matter of days, and then they would manifest in that exact location. And the information was never given to anybody outside a very, very close-knit group of people. I'm talking about a handful of people, and I know for sure that they don't go out and make them. They're very responsible people.
All right. Okay, that does make sense. If she was actually able to call it, unless she was in league with with a group of British students who were going to then run out and quickly create what she had declared would occur, then yeah, that's fairly good proof, I guess. But again, I'm concerned that if these circles are containing this kind of important message for mankind about our own Earth, it's just too subtle. And I, as you mentioned, I'm sure it's very, very frustrating for you. How do we move it to the next level and get people to understand that these messages, or at least some portion of them, are absolutely real and critical to our survival?
I'll give you another example of the information that she was giving back in '87, and the watchers were saying that within our time, and indeed by the year 2007, so I'm definitely looking forward to next year, that the actual technical information of the symbols would be revealed. People would be given the information, and scientists would actually start revealing the fact that there is technical knowledge hidden inside the crop circles, because each symbol speaks on different levels to different people. And back in 1991, something very interesting was happening in the fields. The crop circles were appearing in twos. In other words, they were appearing. Identical crop circles were appearing literally within a half a mile of each other, within days of each other. And I remember the work of a couple of very interesting people called Myers and Percy, who at the time measured the designs, two in particular, which to all intents and purposes seemed absolutely identical, carbon copies of each other. And to them, when they looked at the actual measurements and the actual schematic drawings of these designs and overlaid them, they found that the designs were not identical. There were small numerical discrepancies between them. And being mathematicians, they began to look at the numbers that were being drawn out of the difference between the two designs, and they found the first series of numbers actually equated to the speed of light, our known speed of light.
Oh, no
but they
kidding.
were left with a whole bunch of numbers left over, and they thought, well, let's apply this by logic and see what these two sets of numbers then mean. And from that, and I'm going to cut a very, very long story short, they were able to extrapolate not one, not two, but three speeds of light. Now, at the time, most orthodox scientists basically laughed at this suggestion until about 3 years ago, I believe. It was revealed in, I think it was Nature magazine, if I'm not mistaken, that science has now finally proved that there are two speeds of light. So the circle makers appear to be well ahead of us because we extracted this information back in 1992, and we revealed that there was 3 speeds of light available in the universe. That's just one example. The second example is that the watchers were saying that there is a device, there's an energy machine that's transcribed in these symbols, and this energy machine has something to do with the illusion of time and the ability to transmute magnetism and possibly gravity. So
my gosh, you're moving awfully quickly here. What circle described the machine you're talking about?
The one on the cover of my book, which is the famous Barbary Castle tetrahedron, which is the one that people just seem to gravitate to. And it was the sort of the crowning glory of the year 1991. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's basically a series of radiating circles and rings from a central source bounded by a triangle or a tetrahedron with 3 balls at each end. And I know for a fact that one gentleman here in America who's keeping very quiet, and I certainly won't mention his name, he actually contacted me and said that he was able to build a 6-foot, 3-dimensional replica of this tetrahedron using the exact angles, the exact dimensions and principles, and he's going to levitate in his home. So that's how close we are to actually deciphering this information.
My God, have you gone to visit this man?
No, but he sent me enough information to make it sound very, very credible. And the fact that he's actually sounds very frightened, he knows that he's onto something and he's keeping very quiet. And I also know of people also in Australia who are working with this similar device, and they will reveal this information in their own time. But I am assured that they also have been working with similar principles, and it turns out that they're also working with anti-gravity devices. So it appears that the channeling is bearing true.
Are you telling me that this man has actually achieved levitation using a design from the Barbary Castle circle?
Absolutely. And it's almost 2007.
Yeah, and it's almost 2007. All right, Freddie, hold tight. Over the years, I've interviewed a number of people who've had fascinating things to say about circles, but this may top it. Obviously, we're going to try and pry some information from Freddy about who this man is. And if something like this could be proven, then obviously it would break the whole thing wide open, wouldn't it? Can you imagine that? Levitation from a design derived from the Barbary Castle circle from Manila in the Philippines, where the rain falls gently at the moment. I'm Art Bell. My guest is Freddy Silva. He gave up a very lucrative career in modern commerce to begin a lifelong study of crop circles. And what he said so far has been absolutely fascinating in the sense that he says that the real circles, and there are real circles, folks, are sending a message to us that, in effect, we, through our mass consciousness, have sent out a plea, a message to whoever to help us because of the state of our world. An interesting theory, to be sure, and that what we're receiving in the real circles is an answer to that question. And Don in Campbell, California, fast blasts me a really intriguing proposition. He says, "Hey, Art, has anybody ever thought of doing a project to do a man-made crop circle to communicate with whoever it is or whatever it is that's talking to us? In other words, if we can discern what they're saying to us and it really is some sort of warning, then why not, once we have decrypted it to some degree, attempt to answer and establish some kind of communication with whoever it is that's sending these messages to us?" That question to Freddy in a moment. Clearly, we'll get back to the Barbary Castle business in a moment. But, Freddie, I really do want to ask you about... And you know what? Before I do any of that, you're nice enough to be here. Let me plug your book. Book is Secrets in the Fields, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles. That's a cool title, Secrets in the Fields, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles. Available, I assume, I don't know, Amazon.com, the usual, right?
Well, if you want to support your local author, come to my website. Because then I get at least 50% of royalties if you come to my website, and there's a lovely special offer on there as well. And
oh, no kidding. In other words, you make more money if they come to your website and buy it there.
You'd be surprised how little people make when it goes to a store. Very, very little.
No, Freddie, I would not. I've got a few books under my belt. I'm well aware of how it works, or it doesn't work, more likely. So if they come to your website, what is the special offer?
Actually, there's a DVD that I'm offering with the book, so you get 2 for a reduced price, and it gets bundled together as a big package, and it gets sent off to you in a couple of days.
Okay, and your website is?
cropcirclesecrets.org.
cropcirclesecrets.org. All right. Don in Campbell, California, really did come up with what I thought was an excellent one, and that is, if we have to some degree begun to discern, and if the Barbary Castle thing is true, then certainly we have, what these crop circles mean, then what about the idea of, in essence, answering them with a crop circle?
It's a great question. It has been done, and it's had mixed success. The most famous case I can put my finger on, and it was a very, very good exercise because it had employed archaeocryptographers, it employed psychics, it employed field researchers, and so on. There was a group of about, 12 people who got together one day and said, well, why don't we try to locate through logic and mathematics a very special place on the Earth's surface, especially in England, where we can actually sit down at a very special place where the harmonics are just right. We will pay the farmer for a small piece of his field, and through our combined intent to communicate, we want to find out if there's a consciousness behind this. And this is what this group of people did. And they basically sat down, designed this design based on pure mathematics and harmonics, laid it down on intersecting lines of the Earth's magnetic field, which happen to cross, they're everywhere, but specifically in this one field in south of England. And they created this man-made design, small design, which is basically a triangle with a hole in the center, or a big circle in the center, with 3 circles on the outside of the triangle. And then they sat down around it, and they just meditated. They just sent out the intent between the 12 of them. They said, we would wish to receive a communication to show us, demonstrate to us that we are dealing with a conscious source. Well, a few days went by, nothing happened. A couple of weeks went by, nothing happened. And then suddenly, one day, a pilot was out on his usual daily reconnaissance, and he came across a crop circle, which actually was the triangle with all the circles from the outside put inside the actual design. In other words, the original makers, the people, had left the hole in the center with the circles outside, and the circle.
Back up just a little bit for me, Freddie. What was the intended message of the designed crop circle?
It was simply to communicate to an intelligence, if there was an intelligence out there, that that the people down here, the human makers, had made a design based on pure mathematics, which is the language of the universe. It's just like in the film Contact, basically. Pure mathematics, pure geometry. And they created that shape to try and communicate to a conscious source out there, because if the source that was receiving this message was conscious and intelligent, it would do something with the design. And
but I guess what I'm asking is, did the design have a specific message mathematically?
No, not specifically. It was the intent that the people had. That was the specific reason behind it. It was to communicate.
Okay, and so then a pilot spotted one that had taken the circles and placed them inside.
Inside, as if they filled the actual gap. And the interesting thing was that the the design that was created by the circle-making force was 100 times exactly the diameter of the original that people had made. But here's the interesting thing. The original design that was made by this team had used a very unusual form of measurement. They had based it on the ancient system of measurement called the megalithic yard, which was the unit of measure favored by people who built Stonehenge and the pyramids and things like that. Mm-hmm. And this unit of measure is very, very important. And this design that appeared as an answer to the researchers used that unit of measure to exactly 100 times the size of the original. So beyond doubt, there was beyond coincidental doubt that this was a reply to their intent.
Wow, that is impressive, certainly. All right, back to Barbara Kessel for a moment. You said that a man had created a machine that actually achieved levitation, and you are protecting this man's identity. Surely, Freddie, you've got to pursue this, and if that's real, that would break the whole thing just wide open. So where do we go with this?
At the time that I was writing the book, I had talked to this gentleman, and he was, quite happy for me to, use his information. By the time we got to the editing stage and down to the galley proofs of the book, I contacted him again just to make sure that everything was okay, that I wasn't breaking any confidence. And something had happened in that meantime. He got very, very spooked. And I've spoken to people, throughout my research, and I know when some kind of heat's been put on them, and he basically just wanted to go very quiet, very underground. And it's almost like the story that you hear of people who design carburetors for cars that run on 100 gallons, 100 miles per gallon. They disappear, and they suddenly get very frightened. And that's when he asked me not to mention his name or anything. I just alluded to his work in my book just to let people know that it's out there and it's being worked on, because I think that he's feeling the heat from somewhere, and I'm just being true to my word that I will not reveal the source. But what I can say is that there is published information from another source which is also working on very similar principles. And this is the work of David Percy and David Myers. David Percy actually co-wrote Dark Moon, which is about the supposed faked Apollo moon landings.
Yes.
And also an incredible book called Two-Thirds. It's really a mind-blowing book. It's not for the faint-hearted. And in there, they actually note all the technical information that they have reconstructed from the crop circles, which also has enabled them to technically create blueprints which enable for the construction of spinning disk technology, which allows for anti-gravitational devices.
All right, Freddie, let me again stop you very quickly. There was a man I interviewed several years ago, Freddie. He was an airline pilot. I don't know whether I told you the story previously or not, but by profession, he was an airline pilot, fascinated with crop circles, and he did not give up his career as an airline pilot. But what he had done, Freddie, is he had taken crop circles and made several cutout designs of these crop circles, and then used an old phonograph. The old style spinning phonograph, and had begun to spin the crop circles. And what he had started to discern from that was that there was when they were spinning, there was a three-dimensional aspect to the crop circles that nobody had ever seen before. Have you heard about this?
Absolutely, and I think he was starting to get onto something, and inevitably he also validated more of Isabelle Kingston's channelings, because what the watchers were saying was that what we're looking at, these pretty shapes, we're looking at the two-dimensional slice of an orange. We're looking at an energy form which has three-dimensional and possibly four-dimensional capability. And we've proved that since with magnetometer surveys that show that the energy of the circles goes under the ground, and also the pilots are having problems above the ground. So what we're looking at is just a two-dimensional shape. And I think his name was Doug Ruby, if I'm not mistaken.
That is exactly right.
Yes, and he began to actually look at this. I don't know he was actually aware of this channeled information, but he started the ball rolling. And then with the work of David Myers and Percy, they actually took it to the mathematical level where they extracted the information and actually have made the blueprints. And as far as I'm aware, they're looking for funding at the moment to actually build this machine which will have anti-gravitational properties, again, just as the watchers have mentioned.
All right, but would that be from the same Barbary Castle design?
This would be a series of other designs which could be superimposed one on top of the other, and that's how they were able to discern how that was done. So it seems as if there's different designs of crop circles bearing different types of technical data.
Boy, this is beginning to sound more and more like the movie Contact all the time, isn't it?
Oh, tell me, when I first saw that movie in the cinema, I mean, I nearly cried because I was watching the life of myself and many of my fellow researchers unfolding in front of me. It was so uncannily close to reality, and also close encounters as well. That obsession with wanting to know the coincidences between people from different parts of the world that come together to share a same vision. These things are very uncannily similar.
Where is most of the work? Where does most of the work need to be done? Is most of it mathematical? In other words, do we need a team of mathematicians working on this, or who?
Different types of people are being brought into the awareness because the symbols, again, just like hieroglyphs, they mean different things to different people depending on your point of view, and all of them will be absolutely correct. So there's one symbol in my book that people say, well, that looks just like the hieroglyph for divine vibration. And I said, it's absolutely right. But you know what? If you're a biologist, it looks like the centrosome of a human cell. And both will be exactly right. So the symbols are waking people up from different parts of life. And I know that people are quietly beavering away in their houses, working away quietly. People from NASA have emailed me demanding more information, and they'll say, on no account, return this email back to NASA because, NASA apparently is taking a huge interest in the circles, but they will never make this public. So there are people within that organization who are taking on their own little projects at home. And again, it's the fear that, if they get found out that this is breaking some kind of national security or whatever, they'll get found out, and then the heat will be put on them. I mean, you know how it works. So I know that there are people quietly beavering away at all of this, and all will be revealed in its due time, I think.
All right, so you know for a fact that NASA has their fingers into the crop circle community and is figuring out or trying to figure out what's going on, trying to get as much information as they can. Do you really have proof of that, Freddie?
No, but only from this email from this technician that works there, that he was telling me that there is a lot of interest within that organization. That they actually take it quite seriously. They're keeping a good eye on it. And the way I can validate that is the same way that happened in Britain in the the late 1980s and early 1990s, when the British government was instrumental in debunking the subject. But in the meantime, the military was still keeping it under observation. So clearly people within the system are intrigued as to what's going on. But of course they won't admit it, because to admit that is to admit that we are dealing with a supernatural phenomenon. And of course they can't do that.
Mm-hmm. You referred to the Watchers as a group that could send a message in the manner that we've received them with crop circles, but not actually affect anything, correct?
Pretty much so, because the reason why they called themselves the Watchers, which I thought was very interesting, was that the fact that they can't directly intervene. It almost sounds like Gene Roddenberry's Prime Directive in Star Trek, which is actually very close to reality, because Gene himself used to attend seances with a trance medium. And if you look at the transcripts and then look at the next generation of the series, you'll find a lot of universal law buried in there. And the Watchers were saying the same thing, that they do not have permission to actually directly involve themselves in our affairs. They're just feeding us the information, and they hope that we, by our sense of will choose to act on this information and use it for the development and the betterment of our society.
I take it that you're familiar with the work going on at Princeton.
A little bit, yes.
A little bit. They are, of course, doing work in the mass consciousness field, and I'm just stabbing in the dark here, but I wonder if there's any mathematical correlation to some of the mass consciousness data that they receive and the data contained in a crop circle. This would be a job for a mathematical genius, but I wonder.
That's an interesting observation. I hadn't actually put the two together, but what I do know is that the watchers were saying that the information contained in the symbols also is there to awaken humanity at a spiritual level, because the geometric codes that are encoded within the visual design, but you literally have to sit there and draw this information out of it, does actually correlate to the same geometric structures which are inherent in the human body and its chemical makeup. So it's as if the geometry itself is part of the message. It's part of our coding. And that coding is also speaking to us at a subconscious level that helps us to remember who we are and our function here, which is, presumably why they also use the same type of spiritual technology, as I call it, encoded in places like Stonehenge and the pyramids and the Gothic cathedrals, why the Templars died, in their thousands to, keep this information alive, and why, Dan Brown and Da Vinci Code starts bringing this information back up again. It seems to be part of a fundamental archetypal message, an archetypal language, which is hardwired into every living human being.
Freddie, is it true? Is it true, Freddie? I'm sorry, that the Russians actually discovered that the sacred geometric shapes you're talking about have a concordant effect on people's awareness, even the rate of healing, for example?
Oh, absolutely. When the Berlin Wall came down, we had access, of course, to all the files that they had kept at the KGB in Moscow, and some great books were written about this and how the Russians, because they were so cash-strapped, they decided to look at all this ancient esoteric wisdom to find out if there was something true about the way that shape had a concordant effect on the human body and its state of awareness. Because if it was true, they could just build hospitals and buildings that would have an effect on people. And
That's right.
The Bulgarians especially went gang-ho on this idea, and they began to put people who were sick into rooms that were shaped like pentagrams, and they were amazed that people's rate of healing went up dramatically. They then went a stage further, and they built rooms shaped like trapezoids, and they put schizophrenic patients inside them, and they found that shape had an incredible effect on their rate of healing. And they even discovered that when you put blood in a spherical shape, the rate of coagulation of the blood also goes up dramatically. So they basically validated the truth behind these ancient sacred sites, which are built on exactly the same principles of this geometry.
Did they do double-blind studies to prove this? I mean, when you say prove, that's a big word. Did they actually do double-blind studies that were able to prove this rate of healing, that sort of thing? I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, I believe they did. Yes. I'm trying to figure out my source. It was a book. All this information was praised in the book called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, a very famous book by Sheila Ostrander. I think it was written back in '72. And I believe, yes, that it did do blind experiments, because that's one way of validating the scientific process to begin with.
All right, Freddie, hold tight. We're at the bottom of the hour here. Fascinating stuff. The subject is crop circles. My guest is Freddy Silva. His book, Secrets in the Fields, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles. I'm Art Bell. It is indeed, and my guest is Freddy Silva. What a program. We're talking about crop circles, and much of it in a way that we've never talked about them before, the communication going on, why it's going on, what this is all about. Most crop circles actually form between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, apparently. That would be local time, I guess, wherever they're formed, and there's probably reason to why they form at about that time. In a moment, we will ask. Once again, Freddy Silva. And Freddy, is it true that most crop circles do appear between 2 and 3 in the morning local time at whatever the geographic location of their appearance?
It appears to be the case, just based on eyewitness reports and just the general accounts that we've had over the years. And It intrigued me. I mean, I facetiously at the time I was saying that they appear at that time because they like to keep things kind of quiet, and most people, rational people, should be locked away at home in their beds at that time, doing nothing but sleeping instead of being out in the fields watching them happen. And then I came across the most incredible piece of information from the Imperial College of Medicine in London, where they had actually documented on record that 95% of all recorded deaths in hospitals from around the world always happen between 2 and 3 in the morning. And it got me wondering that is there something to do with this particular window of opportunity where it allows a window of opportunity where the soul is able to leave the body, go back to its source, but it also creates a window where information can come to the earth. And, of course, at 2 and 3 in the morning local time is the point on the earth which is furthest away from the sun, which means that the magnetic field of the area also happens to be having a little snooze on its own. So it's as if the planet's defenses are sort of slightly letting their guard down, and it's allowing information to come in the shape of, of crop circles. And, of course, we know that the crop circles themselves also have a deviation of the local magnetic field, and they also always appear on the crossing points of the Earth's magnetic lines of energy. So there seems to be a correlation definitely taking place between that.
Fascinating. Also, the speed with which crop circles form. Now, over the years, interviewing Linda Moulton Howe and others, we've learned that there have been, for example, people who have filmed the formation of crop circle associated with balls of moving light. So what do we know about how quickly these are formed?
Well, back in the early 80s, when none of this information was ever made public, the database showed that there are at least 80 eyewitnesses from all around the world, from Britain, from British Columbia, Japan. All of this stuff was never published, never made public, and all the eyewitness accounts always seem to corroborate one another, that no matter what size these things were, they always seemed to be created within about 15 seconds. And then the most wondrous thing happened one year in 1988 when a surveillance team of researchers and camera people from all around the world gathered on top of this hill in southern England, and they did a stakeout over a field which over the years had been proved very prolific in circle making. So they camped themselves out for 2 weeks, and this is the site of the infamous hoax that was perpetrated by the British military, because on the second night, when all the researchers went to bed early, the military went out, made a crop circle in the middle of the dark, and in the morning, there it was. And it was a very rough series of circles and very crooked lines, but it convinced the press that the whole thing was a big prank, because at the center of each of these rough circles was a horoscope board game and some wooden crosses pointing the finger at occultists and people like that. So everybody went home convinced that the whole thing was a great big joke, except for a Japanese camera crew who had gone all the way to England, and they thought, well, we're here, we might as well stick around and see what else pops up. And they were rewarded when on the last day of the 2-week stakeout, they caught on night vision camera, right at the very edge of the limit of their equipment, a swirl motion manifesting in the crop, which lasted less than 15 seconds, and it completely validated all the eyewitness accounts. And you may wonder, what happened to this famous tape? I mean, it should have been front-page news around the world. Well, the story goes that the Japanese TV crew were under contract with the BBC that should they capture anything on tape, the tapes would be given to the BBC under license. Well, would you believe that the British Broadcasting Corporation lost the tapes? It would be akin to someone losing the tapes of the Kennedy assassination. I mean, you just don't lose something
or say
like
an Apollo mission, for example, or maybe the records of Roswell, or akin to something like that. Huh?
Isn't it interesting? I know it's very funny. I mean, I've worked in broadcasting for many, many years, and I can tell you that just doesn't happen. I mean, once in a while, maybe, but it just never happens. But
well, on the very rare occasions when it does happen, Freddie, it seems to happen to records of things just like this.
Exactly. It's all very, very strange.
Do you know offhand which lettered agencies, Freddie, are taking the aside from NASA, are taking the most interest in this phenomena?
It's always hard to say. If you're dealing with people who try to keep things secret, then obviously the information coming from out of them is always hearsay, or sometimes someone has a contact somewhere within an organization that might spill the beans. But the best information that we had in Britain in the late 80s came from people who were actually researching the subject night and day, who themselves had contacts within the British government. And one man in particular, George Wingfield, and this is already published information, so I'm not betraying any confidence. He had contacts within the British military who had actually said that they had worked with within the Northern Ireland conflict. And for many years, the British government had orchestrated this fictitious press agency that kept feeding information, not exactly truthful information about the Northern Ireland conflict, and supplied it to the media. Well, it turns out that when he investigated the source of the report from which came Doug and Dave, the two famous 60-year-old guys who said that they made every crop circle in the world, sometimes even as many as five in one evening across different countries. Amazing.
By the way, what are Doug and Dave up to these days? Have there been follow-up interviews, and what are they saying now?
Well, one of them should know better because he's dead. He's probably being spanked very heavily by God at this very moment for having gone out and telling porkies. The other one has gone very quiet, although I did catch a retraction from him in the British press, buried somewhere on page 28 on the 28th of December, 1998, which is a great time to find out great retractions of information, because no one's paying any attention to the media in between Christmas and the New Year. And the headline stated in this one column, I was guided by an unknown force, claims crop circle hoaxer. So it seems that even the world's most famous guy who claims to have made all these crop circles himself was guided by an unknown force, which, going back to the George Wingfield story, apparently came from this fictitious press agency that was originally set up to provide bogus information about the Northern Ireland conflict. So MI5 is a good acronym to bear in mind. It's the British Secret Service, in other words. But in the meantime, when they finally came up with Doug and Dave's story to the media, they were still keeping tabs on what was going on. People's phones were being tapped and so forth.
Jim in Virginia Beach, Virginia asks, does Freddy consider any of the crop circles made in the UK this summer to be authentic? His website, last updated in early August, says he believes most up until that time were fake, ? But they seem to be so complicated and beyond human capability to manufacture.
I hate to be the bringer of bad news, but so far there's nothing this year that I've seen that looks anything closely resembling a real crop circle from England. The real ones seem to be here in America and also in Australia and in Hungary, and they're simple designs. What's happening is, and this is not to say that the phenomenon's gone away, it's just that some years it goes up in numbers, some years it goes down, because the force that's working with it also has to work with natural principles, and sometimes the natural elements are there to work with, and some years they're not. It's like a tide, it goes in and out, just like in nature. But this year what we're seeing a lot of is farmers who are actually taking the money from groups to make designs in their field. Now, when you have the farmer's permission to make something on their land, first of all, you're going to have a lot of time on your hands because you are immune from prosecution. Now, that's a pretty good way to start. Two, I'm watching a lot of the more complex designs being made in fields which are well away from any public areas, which means, again, they can work within the cover of daytime. And I know that a couple of the so-called Mayan design ones, I have actual pictorial evidence to suggest that the people who made them first started off up in the Midlands, in the north of England, and then it came down to the Silbury area. And when they tried to do it in an area which was much more policed by people, they were actually caught making it.
I was just about to ask about that, Freddie, because one of the things that had always been said about crop circles was, in all this time, with all these crop circles, if 80 or 85% of them are fake, Nobody's ever been caught, but you're telling me quite to the contrary. There have been some caught. Is that so?
Yes, they are being caught much more regularly than is being mentioned. I mean, I mentioned this on my website as an antidote to the other websites that are out there. And even when I lived in England, I was right in the heart of the whole mystery. So, I mean, I was catching them myself as well. Other researchers have caught them as well, but it never seems to make the headlines. Yeah, I mean, over the last few years, because the hoaxes are getting much more cunning and cocky, they're also getting a bit overconfident, and they are taking a lot longer to create these intricate designs, and they are being caught in the middle of it. I mean, 2 years ago, and again, I showed this on my website, there was one design in the Vale of Pusey where we get a lot of these designs. It shows the design in progress over several nights, and even shows the actual construction lines in place, where the following evening they come over and fill a few more. And I've even spoken to people, even at my lectures, that have come up to me and said, well, we actually caught these people making these designs one evening, and we got their names, and the names actually correlate to some of the known hoaxes that we know are out there already. So yes, they are out there, and they are being caught making them. So it's quite ironic that just as they're getting more complex, as the human ones are getting more complex, the phenomenon itself is getting simpler and simpler. It's a strange irony. So, but I suspect that next year we're going to see some another level of complexity in the genuine ones as well.
Why do you suspect that?
Because it goes up and down. Historically, when I look at all the information that we've culled from the last 2 decades, it seems to follow a natural wave, just like you find in nature. It goes up and down and up and down, and I think we're into that sort of down cycle. And another reason behind this is that the real crop circles also rely on water. They require water as a prerequisite for making the circles, and we had a major drought in Britain this year. So back in February, I was saying we are not going to see any crop circles this year because there's no water there. They need it to counterbalance the heating effect of the energy that they're working with. And this is also historically proved throughout the history of the phenomenon. Whenever we've had a drought in England, the crop circles retreat as well. And thirdly, because there's so much information still to be deciphered from the amount of information that they've given us, simply giving us even more information is just adding to the plate that we already have, that is already overflowing, and we simply do not have the people, the means, or the money to keep investigating more circles that keep popping up. We need to go back to what's already been culled from the information that's already been gathered, and go back to what was happening in the 80s and the 90s, because there's so much information there. So that's just 3 reasons as to why it's a little bit on the ebb at the moment, but they are beautiful to look at anyway, despite the vandalism to the crops. But then again, as I always point out to people, a Gothic cathedral and Stonehenge are also man-made, and they also have exactly the same technology that goes into the crop circles. So appreciate them for what they are and enjoy them.
How in the world, I mean, it is the eternal question, some of these very large ones that just seem absolutely impossible for humans to have done in the dark of night, they are so very precise. I mean, a lot of people want to know, Freddie, how in the world how's it done?
Well,
not Doug and Dave style, to be sure.
The Doug and Dave style. I mean, some of the complex ones are also genuine. There's both camps are at work here. Let's put this into context. There's still very much a genuine phenomenon going on. I mean, a hoax by theory is a forgery, so a forgery has to borrow from an original. But the more complex ones, what's happening is that there are groups, very large groups of people, up to 12 people in one case, who are involved in coordinating this thing from many points. So when you have 12 people working in tandem, and some of these groups have been doing this for 5, 8 years, so they're not exactly new to this. They're really quite practiced. You can get a lot of work done in a relatively short space of time. And as I say, when you've paid the farmer off, and you're working in a piece of land which is well away from public scrutiny, you often take a day or two to do this thing properly. And from the air, some of these look very, very beautiful, but the evidence on the ground gives the game away, and that is the amount of damage that they've caused because of all the flattening, the mechanical flattening, the lack of electromagnetic frequencies, the anomalies are missing. And most tellingly of all, when you lift up the crop, you can see all the tracer lines on the ground that they've actually used to outline the design, and then they come
Well, exactly. I mean, you would have to see boot prints. You'd see, as you point out, tracer lines, all kinds of things that would be done in a mechanical effort? I mean, it should be fairly obvious, and you're saying it is.
I mean, to me it is, but I mean, I've been doing this for over 15 years, so anybody who's got a pretty good eye and also an objective point of view, and I have to admit, it's very difficult sometimes to keep an objective point of view because you're so excited by the whole thing. To someone who does it day in, day out, you can begin to tell the difference, and the other difference is, and I'm talking here on an etherical level now, the number of times that you go into genuine crop circles, you also start to suck up the energy like a sponge. And I mean, I get to the point where I actually start feeling a little bit uncomfortable in the genuine ones now because I've soaked up so much energy in my body over the years that I just feel better just staying outside of them or just going into them for a little bit of time, just making sure that I know what I'm looking at, being satisfied and coming back out again. Because all the frequencies which are vibrating in the genuine designs are also vibrating the water molecules in your body. And if you start feeling a little queasy, then it's time to leave as well.
All right. Well, that actually brings up another topic. You yourself, Freddie, said you had a life-changing experience in a crop circle. Can you describe to us what happened to you, where and when, and all the rest of it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a day that I can definitely say I stopped being an atheist and I started believing in God in the biggest sense because it changed my life. And I had no idea that this was going to happen either. And what happened was that by 1997, I began to reach the conclusion that a lot of the stuff that was being created with the crop circles was based on sound. And I wanted to go and validate that. And I wanted also to go to the fields in England to honor that because I felt that there was a communication that was being handed to me subconsciously. Some of this information it was almost as if I was having stuff being spoken in my ear, and I just kept writing this stuff down. So I wanted to go and lie in a crop circle and just give thanks to the source that had been providing this information. Because I was feeling very, very guided, but I was still a little bit somewhat sort of skeptical. So one evening, one day I walked into this design in 1997, and I had an immediate recollection of the design. I just knew what it was, even though from the ground level it was very hard to make out. I just felt very much at home. And I said to my friends, I said, I want to come back in here tonight with a little bit of music and just honor the space and just ask about the connection to sound and light and see how these things are made. Well, I went back there about 11 o'clock at night, pitch dark, and I just laid down. I put this little piece of music next to me on this boombox, lay down, and the next thing I remember in the middle of the night was this incredible bright light shining above me. It's the kind of light that beams in your eyes first thing in the morning when the sun is beeping through the shutters in your window and your eyes start flickering because it's so bright. Well, I have to say at the time that I felt very, very frightened because I suddenly felt that perhaps I was about to be abducted or something, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to open my eyes at this stage. I don't know what's above me. And it was kind of comical and frightening at the same time. But the next thing I remember, something hit me on the back of the shoulder, and it created no pain. It was like a very dull thud with a very large baseball bat. And I remember losing all my trepidation, and I felt light as a feather. And the next thing I remember was watching my hands and my arms float past me, and I thought, that's interesting. And I couldn't feel the ground below me anymore. I was literally levitating. And it was the strangest sensation, but I felt so at peace. And the next thing I remember, and I remember this vividly, there were 3 very, very tall beings either side of me, 2 at the bottom of my feet. One was sort of making interesting gestures with his hands.
Wow.
And it was the most incredible, unconditional love I've ever felt in my entire life. All
right, Freddie, hold that thought. We're going to come back to that after the break. We're at the top of the hour once again. Freddy Silva is my guest. And once again, his book, what an elegant title, Secrets in the Fields, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles. From Southeast Asia, I'm Art Bell. One of the most interesting programs easily that we've ever done on crop circles. Freddy Silva is my guest, and if you have questions, and I have no idea how you could be listening for the last several hours and not have questions for Freddie, then grab one of those lines and come on aboard because we're going to begin taking calls for Freddie in a very few moments. From Manila in the Philippines, I'm Art Bell. Back to it in a moment. All right. Just before we go to the phones, I want Freddie to have an opportunity to finish that story because he had mentioned that there were beings present. So please, Freddie, do finish that story.
Oh, absolutely. One of the most interesting aspects of my life so far. Yes, I was sort of... I had these sort of very, very tall beings on either side of me, three either side of me and two at my feet. And they seemed to be sort of creating these gestures with their hands. There was no spoken communication taking place, but as I said earlier, there was this incredible feeling of unconditional love and support. And it's a feeling which I would love to experience more often in my life. It was just absolutely wonderful. And I wasn't really sure what was going on, except that... Suddenly I had this click, and I hit the ground with a thud, and 45 minutes had elapsed in a fraction of that time, because obviously it was a cassette tape that was playing in the background, and the tape had finished, and the mechanism had clicked. So what sort of validated the whole thing in my mind was that I went back to the bed and breakfast where I was staying, where a colleague of mine and also a fellow researcher who, ironically, was also a psychic, and she basically, I met her at breakfast, and she asked me how the evening had gone, and I said, well, I'm trying to put it all into words. I just don't know where to even begin. And she began to spontaneously channel and saying, well, they're telling me that they fed you information about a book you're going to be writing. And I said, what book? I don't want to write a book. I'm doing quite well with my life. Thank you very much. I've got better things to do with my life. And sure enough, a year later, I resisted it, and the book came out. I mean, 5 chapters came out in 1 week. I have no idea how that came out. And I can tell you as a writer for many, many years, that just doesn't happen that fast. But she was able to describe in intimate detail everything that had happened that evening, and I didn't even tell her anything. And that's how it validated it for me. The whole thing really did happen. So it suddenly told me that there is another veil of reality out there, and it's very benevolent, and it's very helpful to us. And in fact, it's much closer to us than we believe. It's here, it's around us every moment of the day, always providing us with help. Should we ever ask for it?
Okay, Freddie, let's go to the phones, take a call, and say, hello there, you're on the air, Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell and Freddy Silva.
Hello?
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 Yes, hello?
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure it was me.
It is you.
Okay. What I wanted to bring up was pertaining to the Barbary Castle drawing in 1991 and a later one that showed the triangle with the circles or the circle equivalents inside the triangle has to do with the original meanings of that Barbary Castle. Just as the sighting in July 11th was 6 days away from the July 17th, 1991, which was Barbary Castle, as 6 days after that, it was signaling what to do about the 666. The Barbary Castle is the Enigma instructions, one of which has to do with the Unholy Father entity, the Unholy Son entity, and you notice there's 6 sections in the third portion that basically the 6 plus the whole equals the 7 Unholy Trinity, making 9 in total. Those, and notice the triangle has the target over it, and if you target the triangle, is what it's saying, putting the unholy at the devil's triangle, there's the real instructions.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, ma'am. Let's just go ahead and ask Freddie. If Freddie, in all of your research, is there anything at all to indicate what this lady seemed to be suggesting, that there is some demonic influence here?
It's an interesting proposition. Well, first of all, I should clarify that 666 actually, it's actually the number of the sun. It has nothing to do with the devil. I mean, the devil is an invention of the human mind. It's just basically the unbalanced dark side of life. And 666 really has to do with the angles of the hexagon, which traditionally has been the sacred geometrical shape, which has been associated with the solar principle. So it's a series of numbers which has neither good or bad attached to it. It's just an energy principle. The other thing I would say in defense of the Barbary Castle tetrahedron, and also every crop circle that I've seen so far in my experience, is that people who, or beings or entities or energy that's inherently dark, usually does not create beauty, and all of these things are beautiful. They are incredible, beautiful works of art. So I probably would err on the side of this being a good thing. It's a positive thing. It's certainly nothing to do with dark forces or anything. So
I don't know. I mean, there's nothing to say, Freddie, that something on the dark side or evil could not be disguised as something beautiful. There are many people who believe that could be so, and certainly I believe 666 is pretty well known as the number of the beast, is it not?
Absolutely, but it's the interpretation that was attached to the number of the beast. I mean, there's been many interpretations of the Bible, and it's becoming quite obvious that there are many translation errors and also ideological interpretations that were built into the modern translations of the Bible, as far as I'm aware. And these were the interpretations of the day, which is mostly the interpretations of people who were living in the Dark Ages, which were very, very dark times in Europe. So, of course, the whole concept of the devil and the dark side of nature was very much predominant in people's minds at the time when they were translating this. So you got to take that into consideration. But people who are working on the sort of more original interpretation of the Bible, from what I understand, seem to suggest that a lot of these principles that were turned into the sign of the devil actually were constructs of the Roman Catholic Church, which were using the powers of evil, of dark, of fear to try and keep whole populations under control by using fear as a motive. So you've got to keep that into perspective, I believe.
All right. Okay, well, let's go to our next call. You are now on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi.
Thank you for taking my call, Art.
Sure.
Hello, Fred. 2 questions, please. The quick question is, has anybody done DMT while in a fresh crop formation? And the second was, in 2003, Mountain Astrologer did a crop circle issue. There was a crop formation photograph by Lucy Pringle, and it was dated 2002, and it had no other reference to the picture. It showed a bust shot of a classic alien's upper torso in a rectangular frame, and the alien is flanked right next to him by a giant circle with raised, etches, raised pixels and it looks like he's holding it in his hand like it's either a DVD or a data disc, and he's got a little smirk on his face, and it just couldn't help wonder if you were familiar with it. I figured if Lucy Pringle had photographed it, then it still doesn't prove it was a genuine crop formation. So, no one's ever talked about this since I saw that, and I just wondered if anyone had gone in there to verify that alien bust shot, because the last alien before that was next to Arecibo just before 9/11.
All right. Hold it right there. We'll take them one at a time. The last first, the Lucy Pringle thing.
Yeah, I was actually in that formation, and in fact, I actually interviewed the farmers who owned the fields and people who lived nearby. And judging from their reports, it seems that the farmer was well aware that people were making that design over the course of several days. And the local residents also saw a lot of overhead lights being used at 2 o'clock in the morning, supposedly by people trying to light the field. Now, I personally saw a lot of evidence of mechanical flattening in that field. And I also found strategically placed holes which have been covered up and filled back in at certain construction points, which were consistent with the construction of the design. So, and also, thirdly, the fact that it actually doesn't resemble any other of these symbolic crop circles, and it's a very blatant image of one of the Star Trek characters from the first generation of Star Trek series. would suggest to me 90% convinced that it was a big joke perpetrated by the usual perpetrators. And in fact, the technique that they used, which is very, very clever, it's a technique often used in the printing industry to portray a picture with dots on a piece of paper to give it the illusion of a physical image, was used by the same team who have been making crop circles in England for a lot of money and for many, many years. They used the same technique to create other designs which were commissioned by the BBC in different parts of the country. So I'd have to say, hand on heart, that I'm not convinced by that design at all.
All right, and on the question of DMT, I'm not sure why he asked, but there are people who feel that some drugs are a gateway to some understanding that will not be gained otherwise. Any comments, Freddie?
I'm actually not familiar with DMT. What exactly is it?
It's a drug. It's a hallucinogenic kind of drug.
Oh, like LSD, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sort of.
And the question was, has anybody tried doing that?
Yes.
In crop circles? I would say no. I guess I have to cover myself on that one.
No, that's just fine. All right. Well, are you covering yourself, or did you give it a shot?
No, I prefer to be very lucid, because one of the things that you'll find in the genuine circles is that your ability to think logically is greatly hampered by the frequencies inside the genuine circles, which start to shut down your left analytical brain. And many have been at the times when people have gone in, tried to measure things, and even in front of TV cameras, and we can't even count straight from 1 to 10. Because the functions of the logic brain start shutting down, and it's purely an after effect of the frequencies in the crop circle, which are shutting down your analytical mind to get you into the intuitive side. So I tend to be more lucid when I go in there, because what's happening in there is already interesting enough by itself.
Got it. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi. Hello there, East of the Rockies. Well, I guess you're not. Let me try west of the Rockies and see if you're on. No, apparently not. Okay, let's try our next call, such as it is, and say you're on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi.
Hello.
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 There you are.
Hi. Hi. I'm calling from Virginia, and my first question is the music that Freddie felt compelled to listen to. Was it possibly Pink Floyd?
That goes together with the DMT question, sort of.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a very good segue. No, it wasn't actually. It's a good try. It was actually a piece of music by John Seary. John is renowned for making some of the most beautiful, beautiful astral music. He sort of paints with music, and he's commissioned by planetariums around the world to create a lot of their soundscapes. So it was a piece of his. I was actually very moved by that particular piece of music, and I felt that it actually matched the particular idea with which I was going into the crop circle, and I think it matched the overall aura of the state of the crop circle as well.
Well, I don't know what DMT is, and I don't do drugs. But I met David Percy at Richard Hoagland's old house in Virginia when some crop circle researchers were there a long time ago. And we were having a lot of real deep discussions about tetrahedrons and sacred geometry and the crop circles and resonance and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking to David Percy about music. And I said, I think that Pink Floyd was really onto something, because if you look at the cover of the Dark Side of the Moon album with the triangle and the light coming through, to me, there was a resonance there, and there's a resonance to their music. And we were talking about Glastonbury Abbey, too, and having this real strong feeling about Glastonbury. And he said, when I went to Glastonbury Abbey the last time, he said, I felt compelled to listen to Pink Floyd. And so that's why I asked you that question. And then that is a segue into something else. I thought it was very interesting that there was a recent crop circle that was a Star of David, which is actually the base of Glastonbury Abbey, is it not?
You mean the underlying geometry of the Abbey?
Yes. And she's on to something in a way, because Freddie, there's a definite relationship mathematically with of course, music as well as crop circles. So I don't know. She could be on to something there. I don't know if it's particularly connected to any one group, but the music is mathematic. There's no question about it.
Absolutely, and in fact, it's a very good question because it does begin to demonstrate that anybody who works on a creative level, where the information comes from, and there's so much information out there to prove that whenever we're working with an intuitive level of information, whether you're a painter, a musician, or just daydreaming, that information, you basically drift off, part of your soul drifts off into another level of reality where you are extracting information from an astral reference library, and that's where the ideas come from. And that's where we sort of meet the circle makers, so to speak. And that's where our ancestors also were able to do the same thing. They extrapolated the laws of the universe into which they hardwired into places like Stonehenge. And now we're finding the same information mathematically, musically, geometrically in the crop circles as well. So it all comes full circle to
okay. Let's try west of the Rockies. You're on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi.
Hi, this is Ward in San Carlos, California.
Yes, Ward.
Yeah, I'd like to know what kind of tools they use to make the crop circles.
You know, that actually is a very good question. Aside from Doug and Dave and their boards and chains, Freddie, what are the more modern methods of constructing these things?
Oh, it hasn't got any better than that. They either use planks of wood or garden rollers, or in desperate cases, they actually take a lawnmower to the field, which is pretty obvious. But, yeah, the garden roller, I thought, was particularly inventive because you've got to actually carry this thing, and then someone has to carry a few gallons of water and fill the garden roller with water, and then they use that. And I have to say, the ones that are made with garden rollers, they are much, much neater than the ones made with planks of wood, but they do obviously crimp the plants at the base, which is a very telling sign. So it's still crude, but after years of practice, some of these groups have got it down to a fairly good fine art, even if at the end, when you go there, the evidence is very obvious on the ground.
Gotcha. All right, east of the Rockies, you're on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi.
Hi, how you doing, Art?
Okay, sir.
All right, my question for Freddie is, I know that during a lot of natural catastrophes or unnatural catastrophes, people have claimed to see a small silver disc in the sky. And my question was, because during the last footage of the space shuttle entry that disintegrated, I noticed on some news channels they'd show one angle that would show, and I pointed out to all my friends, that if you look in the background, there's a very small little silver ball disc that's just hanging in the sky, like almost like, he was talking about the watchers, almost like a watcher that knew this event was going to happen. Has he ever seen that footage, or has he ever checked out the footage of the space shuttle disintegrating upon entry and noticed this tiny little small ball? It's not an airplane, it's not an aircraft, it's stationary, but it's in the sky, and it's only on the very few angles that you could see it. Actually, only one.
Okay, well, I'm sure that a lot of people are going to now go take a look at that. I know I didn't know how it related to crop circles, but have you noticed anything of the sort?
It's a very good question, actually. It's very relevant, and I would never have believed it until I saw it myself, because I, too, heard about the accounts of people seeing balls of light or little silvery objects about the size of a beach ball, and there's been some very famous footage over the years of these things interacting with people in the fields. And having lived where I've lived in the Vale of Pewsey and in Wiltshire in England, I actually came across a lot of these many, many times, and I can tell you, in the evening, they are the most incandescent color, the most radiant color you'll ever see. It almost makes you, it brings you to tears because the beauty of this color is incredible, and you can interact with them. They almost read your thoughts. They react to your thoughts. And
Freddie, we've got to hold it there. The most beautiful thing you've ever seen. All right. With that, close your eyes, listen to the music, and see if you get anything out of that. We're at the bottom of the hour from Manila in the Philippines, where the rain is gently falling. I'm Art Bell. Indeed, secrets in the fields, the science and mysticism of crop circles. My guest is Freddy Silva, and if you'd like to get hold of his book as well as a DVD, there's a better deal than going, I guess, to Amazon, and that would be obtained on his website at www.cropcircles.com. cropcirclesecrets.org. That's cropcirclesecrets.org. In a moment, we'll get right back to Freddy Silva. My guest is Freddy Silva. Obviously, the subject, crop circles. Aaron, poor Aaron in Houston, Texas, was on the east of the Rockies line and got dumped by mistake. Sorry about that, Aaron. He says, when I got disconnected, I was about to ask Freddy if crop circles are a way to bypass government suppression of information to the general public. Freddy?
Ooh, good question. I guess yes, because they're revealing all kinds of esoteric information, which is not just bypassing governmental stuff. It's also bypassing about 2,000 years of religious indoctrination in the West. Namely the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, and you can read into that all kinds of things. So yes, it's the rise of ancient information which has been going on for thousands and thousands of years in the human race. It's universal knowledge, which is again coming to the fore. So I would say yes, it's bypassing the control mechanisms, and part of the reason that the Watchers were laying down this information, going back to what I was saying about the helping to raise human consciousness, was that we are coming to the end of a 4,000-year experiment in human consciousness, where we decided to give our power away from the many to the few. And it's part of an experiment whose time has come and gone, and that's the good news. So we're in this age now, we're reaching the final stages of this evolutionary movement, where the powers that be are losing that grip, and in order to lose that grip, people are being fed this incredible universal library of information, which is helping to wake up the human race. So things are much, much better than we're led to believe, yes.
All right, let's go to the first-time caller line from Hawaii. You're on there with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi.
How's it, gentlemen? Good to talk to you. Freddie, I have a couple questions for you, sir, please. First, how old or what's the earliest in history that crop circles are noted?
I think the earliest evidence that I have, that I can say hand on heart, is a pretty good indication that we're dealing with the same phenomenon, is 1682, and it's actually written to a large degree, including diagrams of squares within circles, found in tall pasture in the county of Staffordshire in England. And it was written by no less than the director of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, which is a pretty good seat of learning. And he does describe in very good detail the same ground features and plant features that we find today. There's also mention of circles and witches' rings found in the doctrines of John Wayland, who was Henry VIII's chronicler in the 1500s, and he talks about the origin of Morris dancing and the patterns of the dancers, and it was said that the dancers get the geometric patterns for the dancers from the geometric shapes that they find in the tall grass at the first thing in the morning. So the phenomenon's quite old.
Right, I could see that. I could see it being old. The second question, sir, thanks, is in the ones that you have determined personally to not be man-made, do you ever discover any mistakes or irregularities among the geometry?
Okay, that is very interesting. Or are they absolutely perfect?
Actually, no, they're not totally perfect. In fact, the genuine circles are never true circles. They're always slightly elliptical, which poses a real problem for hoaxers, because you need to put a stake in the middle of the ground and draw a line, a radius, to which to get a perfect circle. The problem is that with the genuine circles, the center is always off-center, and the actual circle is slightly elliptical. And just like a Greek column on a temple, the further away you look from it, the more circular it becomes. In terms of mistakes, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but there's always one element inside the genuine ones, and I'll use the Barbary Castle tetrahedron as the most famous example of this, where one of the actual arms of the tetrahedron that subtends all the circles and rings of this design is slightly bent, to which all the naysayers were saying, well, obviously it's man-made, they made an error. Well, going back to the work of Colette Dowell and Percy and Myers, they actually took the ground surveys, which at the time were being done meticulously by a man called John Langrish, and they discovered that mistake actually revealed a strategic angle of energy upwelling. And what I mean by that...
I don't know if you ought to be giving all this away. You may be telling the hoaxers how to do it better.
Oh, I'll tell you, since my book came out, their work went up incredibly. I mean, they tried to use all this stuff in my book. They weren't getting it quite right, but you could tell that they tried using it against us. So it's a double-edged sword. But,
well, like the police, you better hold a few things back. Wildcard Line, you're on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Hi.
Oh, hi, Art. Hey, Freddie. This is Jeremy calling from Brooklyn. It's a fantastic show tonight.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, and I'll get off the air after I'm done. You had mentioned a tribe in South Africa who had known about these formations for like thousands of years. Do they have any method of translating them? And if they do, or if they don't, either way, is there any chance of getting together with them to try to decipher these messages from the circles?
Okay.
Okay. The information came from a renowned historian in South Africa called Credo Mutwa, who wrote it in a book called Isawil, which means the animal. It's very, very hard to get your hands on it. And he basically chronicled the myths and legends of tribes as you walk through South Africa, and that's where the information came from. And from what I hear, the actual designs themselves, they told a story. They were symbolic, and they gave you archetypal information. They didn't mean anything specific to anybody per se. Unlike, for example, the Barbary Castle tetrahedron crop circle, which is full of technical data of all kinds, as well as alchemical data and symbolical data to do with the Holy Trinity. So the actual message itself is more in terms of an archetype, which is not meant to be logicalized. It's meant to be internalized, and it brings spiritual evolvement to the individual who sees the design.
All right. East of the Rockies, your turn with Freddy Silva. Hi.
Hi, Art, Fred. Why, do you think these crop circles are done in live vegetation because they're time sensitive, and this way they don't have to erase them? The crops die and they're gone.
That's an interesting question also.
That is interesting. Wow. I get to learn something tonight. Actually, they occur also in non-vegetation, because they also occur in ice and snow. And they also sometimes very rarely occur on desert floors. For example, the Alva Desert, I think on the eastern Oregon border, there was a major crop circle there that was actually etched into the actual hard desert floor, made up of 13.3 miles of lines, creating the famous Sri Yantra mandala. So they do happen in all kinds of shapes and forms and all kinds of media. But I think one of the reasons why they also occur primarily in wheat and barley is because wheat is also the symbol of the fertile mother. It's the symbol of Ceres, the Earth Mother herself. So in a way, it's also symbolic that it happens in that particular medium, and the fact that it also imprints the energy into the seeds, and those seeds are going into the food stuff, in other words, into bread, and we're actually eating and ingesting the seeds of the energy of the crop circles as we're actually doing it. So it's actually a very cunning plan.
Freddie, have you been able to validate or say that any of the crop circles that have, well, I shouldn't have said crop circles, any of the circles that have appeared outside of crop formations have been valid, for example, on ice or even on dirt or anywhere else?
The ones on ice are not to my knowledge. I don't think anybody's been able to actually take any samples or collect evidence to support the theory. They're just, at the moment, an anomaly. There was one case actually not far from me in Cape Elizabeth in Maine back in '97 where someone called me and they said there's a crop circle here in the snow. So I lived locally, so I just drove up here, and in fact, it was an oval shape in the snow, no tracks going in and out, and the snow in the actual snow circle had been sort of slightly compressed about an inch just below the normal, the actual new fall of snow. And when I actually took some electromagnetic frequency readings, the actual perimeter of the actual affected area did jump up in frequency. So it was an electromagnetic phenomenon. Now, whether it's related to the crop circle phenomenon, that I can't say.
Okay.
That for sure.
All right,
yeah,
that's wild. We're short on time. Let me go to the wild card line. You're on the air with Freddy Silva. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Art and Freddie. I have a couple questions here for Freddie. One, if you've ever read or understood anything upon Edward Leedskalnin in Coral Castle in Florida. He built Coral Castle.
Oh yes, very much so. In fact, I wrote about him.
I did a lot of research. It took me about 10 years, but basically, mathematically, you can't explain how you can have three-dimensional magnetic field lines on a planet with just a north and a south. It'd be A, B. Where's the C, or where's a point along that line? And it was very disturbing to me. And I'm wondering if these circles happen to show up on basically where one of these lines come out of the planet. Like, say, okay, birds and animals are supposed to be able to see, and science has proven that they can see the magnetic disturbances of the magnetic field lines of the planet.
Well, science, I think, has proven that the birds follow the magnetic lines, but I don't know that they see them.
Well, they're supposed to be able to, like, you know how they if something is going to happen, they fear it and they run from it, like a magnetic disturbance. So my question is, do these crop circles like land, or not land, but do they happen in general areas of, you know, where the strength is more, or sort of like mathematical? I don't know where it all comes together.
Okay. In other words, do these crop circles show up where there's a stronger magnetic influence on the Earth?
They, without exception, all the genuine crop circles always appear at the crossroads of magnetic lines of energy. It's the same lines that are shared, are the same nodes that are shared by all the sacred sites in the world, like the Pyramid, Stonehenge, Avery Stone Circle, Standing Stones, the Ohio Serpent Mound. They all share the same crossroads of energy, and the diameter is always defined by the width of the energy at the time. The second thing is that inside the actual crop circle itself, the genuine ones, and this is what Colin Andrews found in his 20% theory, was that the Earth's magnetic field is shifted about 4 degrees inside that space. So they are definitely associated with the magnetic field of the Earth, which again validates the channeled material from 1987, which also mentioned the same thing, that the crop circles are created by a combination of sound, light, and the change and the manipulation of the local magnetic field. So all that has now been proved. Absolutely.
Okay. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Freddy Silva and Art Bell. Good morning.
Hi, how you doing? My name's Alan from Florida.
Yes, sir.
And my question is that with the crop circle and your out-of-body experience that you had in the middle of the crop circle, how much do you know of the out-of-body experiences that could connect it to your experience in the crop circle? And as well, a question about the individuals in the houses that were next to the alien crop circle that was pointing at the code. Exactly, is there anybody else that can validate for your claims that they saw these people there?
The answer to the second one is that I seem to be in a minority of people who are willing to say the truth and to be objective about what I hear.
Well, truth is a questionable answer, actually.
Absolutely. Truth is a personal thing. Absolutely. And all I'm saying is I'm regurgitating the information that I was given by the people that I interviewed in the area. So I only have their word to go by, and also what my eyes and ears saw when I go into the crop circle, and the evidence that I uncovered, which led me to believe that there was a mechanical flattening process.
And are their names public?
Which names?
The names of the individuals that saw these people doing the crop circles. The alien and pointing to the picture.
Oh, no, they've never been made public. I mean, these are local people who prefer not to have their names mentioned across the paper because they don't want their houses invaded by people, because that's essentially what happens afterwards. They are descended upon by hundreds of enthusiasts, and the English don't really like that kind of thing. They're very private people, so they'd rather just
That seems like an opinion to me.
Well, it's not an opinion. It's a fact based on facts gathered by myself at the actual location. So you'll just have to take my word for it, rightly or wrong.
Okay. Well, I can well imagine they wouldn't want to be assaulted. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Freddy Silva. Hello.
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 Good morning.
Hello, Freddie.
Good morning.
Good morning. I've got just a simple question, I guess. Why are the crop circles basically concentrated in England?
It's a good question. There's a few reasons for it, and it's mostly to do with the geography and the type of rock that they prefer. One of the fundamental things that they require for their creation is water. Now, there's several reasons for this. One is because they are actually imprinting information into the water, which Jacques Benveniste in France has been able to prove, and also because the large concentration of surviving sacred sites anywhere in the world, and that part of the world has them, and which brings us ultimately to the big question as to why the crop circles are appearing, because wherever they appear in the world, and even here in America, they always appear next to ancient sacred sites, as if they're trying to remind us of a connection that needs to be made again, because those sacred sites were built with the exact same templates and principles that the crop circles are using. So what the circle makers are saying is that, first of all, they're using the geology to create the designs in an area which has a lot of water trapped in the actual rock on which they appear, and also they appear next to the sacred sites to get us to look back at our ancient history, to go back to these places which were very, very special. They were places where you'd have healings and altered states of awareness whenever you walk into places like Stonehenge. And that ultimately is the connection that they're trying to make. They're getting us to look back at our history at a time when we need to reconnect with these fundamental natural principles so that we can regain the balance in life.
All right, Freddie, we don't have a lot of time. Let's try one more. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Freddy Silva. Hi.
Good morning, Art and Freddie from northern New York.
Hi.
My question, sir, is it possible, earlier in your show you spoke of these crop circles being created by benevolent watchers. Is it possible that maybe they're pointing us into something we direly need in this day and age, alternative energy?
Yeah, it seems to be the way, because Isabelle's channeling also mentioned the fact that by 2007, people would be used, and I mean that in a nice way, to unravel the technical information of the crop circles to develop energy devices which were based on the illusion of time, the manipulation of gravity and magnetism, and that appears to be what's happening with people quietly beavering away to find out this information. So yes, I do believe that is part of the actual message behind them and what they're actually trying to do for us.
All right, Freddie, you have been a joy to have on the program. I really have enjoyed having you this evening. It's been a hell of a program, really. I hope your book does well. I hope people go to your website and grab that up and they get the DVD with it. That's, of course, cropcirclesecrets.org. That's cropcirclesecrets.org, correct?
Absolutely, and thank you, Art, as well, for bringing all this information to the light. It's you're doing a wonderful service to humanity.
Thank you, my friend, and good night.
Good night.
All right, that is Freddy Silva, and that was one whale of a program, and it's been one whale of a weekend. We'll do it again next weekend. I want to remind you I'm available by email. I have two email addresses, artbell@aol.com, that's ARTBELL at AOL.com, or more likely, artbell@mindspring.com. So for this weekend, from Southeast Asia, I'm Art Bell. Night all.